Okay, yep, all right, and we are on. Okay? All right, good evening. I'm going to call the Hamilton Wenham Regional School Committee meeting to order on Thursday, February 3rd, 2022 at 7:01 p.m. And I'd like to begin the meeting by inviting you to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. So next on our agenda is the public comment portion. Eric, is our Zoom up and running? Yep. Okay, excellent. Before we get started, I should remember to say that this meeting is being recorded and also being live streamed by HWCam. And can be viewed on the YouTube live stream. If you are currently joining us on the Zoom link, that link is going to be open just for public comment. And then immediately following public comment, we'll close down that Zoom link. And if you want to continue watching the rest of the meeting, you can do so on HWCam live stream. If you would like to offer public comment, I ask that you identify yourself by name and please spell your name for us so we get it right. And I ask you to limit yourself in your comments to 3 minutes. And please know that we are here to listen, and this is an opportunity for your voice to be heard. And we appreciate those people that are willing to share that information with us. At this time, I'm going to look around and see if there's anybody here in person that wants to offer a comment. Nope. Okay. And on the Zoom, do we have anyone who would like to offer a comment on Zoom?
Anyone on Zoom, please raise your hand. Use the raise your hand feature if you'd like to comment. And anyone on Zoom, please use raise your hand feature if you would like to comment at the public comment time.
All right. All right. It seems like no public comment at the moment, and we will go ahead and make the Zoom link. We'll close that down, and again, you can continue watching on HWCam. Oh, I'm sorry, Michelle Bailey, do you have a question?
Watch on HWCam.
I have a question. Yep. I see that our agenda was amended on February 2nd, and I hadn't looked at it since then. Could you let us know what the amendment was?
It was a re-edition. Rep. Belcito was on the original agenda, and then we hadn't heard from her, so we thought we'd take her off, but then yesterday afternoon she said, I'll be there.
All right,
so
thank you.
it was on the original agenda and then taken off.
Okay.
And then once we heard back, we added her back in.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Michelle. Next up, I'm going to ask Julia to read the portion of our school committee protocols as part of our procedure that we read at each meeting. Julia?
As elected members of the Hamilton Wenham Regional School Committee, we, including the superintendent, accept the high honor and trust that has been placed in us to ensure that the students of the district receive the best education possible. To that end, we hereby commit to the following in the conduct of our business. The school committee will establish a vision, create policy, approve a budget, and assure accountability to sustain continuous improvement in teaching, learning, and facilities. Members agree to leave the day-to-day operations, including business transactions, to the superintendent and staff. Members of the school committee recognize that authority rests only with the majority in its decisions.
Thank you, Julia. And as always, my hope in bringing our attention to those protocols, it'll help us keep those in mind, front of mind, not just for the committee members, but also for those at home, as we hope to model civil discourse in these meetings. So, thank you. Looks like our student rep isn't here yet. I think we can, if you're willing, Jen, to make a motion on the consent agenda. Oh, first, does anyone, I literally never remember, and Anna whispers it in my ear every time. Does anyone have anything from the consent agenda that they would like to hold?
Yes. I
Michelle?
would just like to hold the annual report.
Okay, so Michelle would like to hold the FY22 annual report. Anything else? Okay, I think we're ready for a motion then.
I move that we accept the consent agenda as written, with the exception of the annual report that has been held.
Second.
Second by Anna Seidzick. Because this is the consent agenda, there's no discussion. All those in favor? And it is unanimous, and the motion passes. Michelle, what would you like to, you have a question, or?
So my understanding of the town reports are that they are a calendar annual thing and not a fiscal year calendar thing. And so the retirees that are listed are future retirees and not past retirees, which is who I think should be there, the people who retired last calendar year. But I know it's like a new thing, and I know that nobody's driving the boat, anywhere. So I don't think those people have officially been put in a record somewhere. And is it important? No, but if somebody was doing some research, tracking down their family or whatever, it wouldn't be there for them to see, so.
So you're thinking that in the past, and I'm wondering if that in the past, if it has been the previous year, a separate concern perhaps could be that we missed the people that retired last year in
That's the
terms of the
concern.
record, right?
Right, yeah, because it's not a fiscal year report, it's an annual year report.
Yeah.
So we wouldn't report something that's gonna happen.
Okay.
But, like I said, nobody's monitoring these things in the town, and it's just what it is. That's my only concern about it. It's not inaccurate in any way, it's just,
Would you
I'm
want
not sure
to,
those people have been put in a report and recognized, should anybody want to research it in the future.
so would you suggest we remove the people that are future retirees, the 4 that are here,
I would
and switch
replace
them
them.
for the past tense?
Yeah. But if it's already been submitted because there was a deadline, then it's fine to go.
It hasn't been submitted, I was waiting.
Oh, okay.
It has to be approved by the school committee first. Their deadline was the latest, this past Monday.
Okay.
We can approve with edits, already.
Sorry, Dave, can you talk to the
David,
mic?
we can't hear you.
And we approve it with edits?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, we can,
Yeah,
So
I
that
guess
way
if we could just swap
Solve
them.
the problem.
yeah.
I'll double check on the
Okay.
previous one.
Okay.
I mean, it would make sense.
Okay, so,
Yeah, just to report something that has happened
Right.
versus,
all right, so, because I do think that there is an opportunity to approve with edits. Do we want to try to make that motion clear? Michelle, do you want to try to do that?
I move,
Go ahead, Anna.
Well, while we're saying that, then, if it was calendar year, should we also include the former school committee members that served in 2021 as well? Because this is present time, like, do we need to include Peter or?
Well, this is the school, sorry.
yeah, school district.
This is the school committee that's present as we're presenting the report. So this is
Right.
the correct school committee as far as,
Yes.
the report is concerned.
Okay.
And it also does represent the school committee at the end of 2021.
True.
That is,
Okay. I just don't want to, and I think, Michelle, your point about service is important, but I suppose Peter's name and Stacy's name is all over the
They've
public
been in the
record.
other things, yeah.
So,
I move that we approve the school district annual report as presented with an edit of switching the retirees from the 2022 retirees to the 2021 retirees.
Second?
Second by Michelle Horgan. All right, is there further discussion? Eric, do you feel like you have a clear?
Crystal clear.
Excellent, all right. All right, looks like we're ready to vote. All those in favor? All right, and that is unanimous, and the motion passes. Okay. Bill, I don't know if it's just me. I'm having trouble hearing some other people. I don't know if,
Okay, who was it? So I can,
David and a little bit Michelle
right
Horn.
in front of his ball.
He did, he
Was putting it.
He did.
Got two different ones.
Is this one better?
Okay, yeah, that's better.
All right.
All right,
Yeah.
thank you. Okay. All right, let's just move through. All right, next is, all right, well, we're going to skip, we did tell Ms. Belcito, I believe we told her 7:30. We didn't realize how speedy we were.
Well, I told her we start at 7. and we would usually get to that point in the agenda around 7:25, 7:30.
Okay. All right, so shall we move on to the elementary presentation?
Yep.
Looks like you guys are ready and here. All right, thank you.
We are happy to be here. We've been rescheduled for several different reasons, but we're really excited to be here tonight. Eric is going to help us with our presentation. Go right to the next one. Thanks. Last spring, our elementary goals were determined and set around implementing a multi-tiered system of support for our elementary students with the primary focus on literacy instruction and learning. Our benchmarks and action items outline the need to design an elementary MTSS to support the literacy learning of our students, determining the current state of our instructional practices, assessments, and resources throughout the district. We'd like to provide an update on this goal tonight with our primary focus on how the literacy intervention program has been rolled out and the results we're seeing to date. We do know that full changes to create a thriving MTSS system can take 4 to 7 years. We don't expect to wait that long to see the investment begin to show returns, but in order to understand the full impact of an MTSS system on a district, that's the considered time frame. A comprehensive MTSS is outlined in this graphic here from DESE. You can see 3 drivers of the systems, the arrows around the outside. Implementation, competency, and leadership work to frame the entire system. Leadership drivers include scheduling, resource allocations, creating an inclusive culture and climate to engage all stakeholders in the work. Effective leadership requires the addressing of adaptive issues, such as identifying and removing barriers, combined with the technical support, such as finding time and resources. Implementation drivers are designed to create organizational systems that meet the needs of all students, such as the use of evidence-based practices, ensuring standards-based instruction for all students, and creating a robust assessment framework that aligns with the overall tiered system of support. Competency drivers revolve around building our capacity to affect positive student outcomes through thoughtful staffing models, high-quality professional development models, research-based coaching strategies, and development of fidelity assessments and feedback loops to monitor progress and
Excuse me?
effectiveness.
We can't, at least, I'm only picking up about every third word.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Speaking
Bill,
of,
can we turn up the podium microphone?
try that.
I'm glad you spoke up because I was weirdly doing better than I usually am.
We seek to ensure that we have strong leadership. I can really hear that.
Yes, much better.
Competency and implementation drivers that are built on a framework of universal design for learning, UDL, and equitable access for all to ensure that all students are empowered in Tier 1 inclusive classrooms that meet their needs academically, behaviorally, and social-emotionally. UDL is a framework that reduces barriers in instruction, provides appropriate accommodations and supports, and allows for high achievement expectations for all students. including students with disabilities, by providing options and choices for students to personalize their learning. Moving inward on the model, you can see the tiers of support: universal, targeted, and intensive, and that students move from tier to tier flexibly. Those arrows represent elevators, that students move from tier to tier in both directions, and are supported with their academic, behavioral, and social emotional learning needs. The 3 tiers are built on each other. If a student's in need of Tier 2 support, it happens in addition to, not instead of, Tier 1 support. This is not a simple model, as we said, and it takes years to build and implement well. Our first priority has been to design professional development opportunities that will strengthen our teaching of reading. This summer, a group of teachers and administrators began our learning journey focusing on MTSS with consultants George Bash and Judy Elliott, a partnership brought to us by the Essex County Learning Community. With George and Judy this summer, we determined the need to ensure that all students are receiving high-quality instruction in the classroom. We know that interventions that are aligned with classroom instruction are the most effective, and our work this summer identified this wasn't always a practice that we had used in all of our schools. From our work with George and Judy, we came away with a focus on the importance of high-quality instructional resources, careful alignment of our instruction, and the increasing intensity of this aligned instruction. Simultaneously this summer, we brought together members of the newly formed Professional Development Committee, a group of administrators and 2 teachers from each building. Some of our teachers played dual roles and joined us for both the MTSS work and the PDC. Looking at our year through the same lens, the PDC proposed a plan that provided baseline training for all teachers in the fall focused on literacy instruction and assessment, followed by a period of time provided for teacher choice to participate in study groups, ending with a part of the year focused on collaboration and application of their learning. Next slide. This fall, we dove into the science of reading and foundational reading standards to ensure that we had common language and understandings. We unpacked the foundational standards in vertical groupings, diving into the skills that are applied at each grade level within each standard. These were conversations that none of us have had in our time here. While we have studied and unpacked mathematics, science, and even writing standards in depth within the past few years, we had not tackled the foundational reading standards, and this is actually reflective of Massachusetts as a whole, not just our district. These new conversations were bolstered by professional development around our screening tool, the DIBELS 8, the Dynamic Indicators of Basic Early Literacy Skills, an assessment that had not necessarily been administered by all classroom teachers in all schools in the past. Our continued and ongoing challenge is to provide enough professional development that's meaningful for our range of professionals. The PDC designed a study group model that we began in December and now runs through February vacation. We use these Wednesdays to delve into professional resources that are applicable and important for each individual teacher. Choices for teachers have included online modules through Reading Rockets and a selection of books such as Shifting the Balance, Equipped for Reading Success, and Uncovering the Logic of English. On Wednesdays, teachers are reading and reflecting together within a Mighty Networks community after each session. So they're sharing their thinking within a blogging network, sharing their takeaways, their wonderings, and their aha moments. We've seen connections being made and discussions starting between these self-selected groups of teachers. They appreciate the time to study new resources and independence in this project. It gives them to learn what they specifically need to know for their classrooms.
So to frame our learning and our discussions about the science of reading, we're using The Simple View of Reading by Goff and Tumner. It's a formula demonstrating the view that reading has 2 basic components: word recognition and language comprehension. Word recognition, or decoding, is the ability to apply letter-sound relationships to read words. Language comprehension is the ability to understand spoken language. Notice that decoding and language comprehension are not added together in this formula, but are multiplied. If one of the values in the equation is 0, then reading comprehension will not be possible. Strong reading comprehension cannot occur unless decoding skills and language comprehension skills are both strong. The simple view of reading is expanded in Scarborough's reading rope on the next slide. The reading rope consists of lower strands and upper strands, which represent the 2 sides of the simple view of reading formula. The word recognition strands in blue on the bottom of the visual include phonological awareness, decoding, and sight recognition of familiar words. These three strands, work together as a reader becomes more accurate, fluent, and increasingly automatic in their word reading skills with repetition and practice. The language comprehension strands in red at the top of the visual include background knowledge, vocabulary, language structures, verbal reasoning, and literacy knowledge. These 5 strands reinforce one another and then weave together with the word recognition strands to produce a skilled reader given instruction and practice over time. Understanding the simple view of reading and the strands of the reading rope help us to identify strengths and weaknesses in young readers and target our instruction with students. Intervention for struggling readers is effective only when it addresses the student's specific weaknesses, which may be in decoding, language comprehension, or both. When our district literacy team convened in the 2019-2020 school year, we analyzed our district-wide reading data, and just prior to the school closure in the spring of 2020, determined that we have work to do on the word recognition side of the simple view of reading equation. In past professional development, we have focused largely on the language comprehension strands of the reading rope and the literature and informational reading standards. Analyzing our reading data, we recognized that many of our students had challenges related to reading fluency, indicating that as a district, we needed to take a closer look at how we teach the various components of the word recognition side of the formula. To help us better understand students' strengths and weaknesses in reading and better target our instruction, we have evolved our reading assessments as a district.
Go to the next slide. It's okay. We have used benchmark assessments 3 times yearly for at least the last 12 years. These assessments are reviewed at grade levels after each round, and instructional plans are made. However, this year, in light of the evolved understanding of our students' needs, we elected to use DIBELS 8 with all elementary schools and a series of more targeted assessments to dive deeper into the skills of our earliest readers. We previously used the benchmark assessment system from Fontes and Pinnell, which was not able to give us information about specific foundational skills that students need to strengthen in order to grow as readers.
This flowchart is a widely used resource from the AIM Institute of Learning and Research. It helps us think about where instruction can be targeted based on the classroom data and benchmark assessments. When thinking about our younger students in kindergarten, 1st, and 2nd grade, we start at the bottom of this flowchart to identify students' strengths and weaknesses and make instructional decisions. So first, with our little ones, we would focus on phonemic awareness skills and decide if further instruction and practice is needed. If those skills are strong, then we would move up the progression of skills to analyze their decoding and phonics skills. If those were strong, we would move up the chart, and if they were weak, we would make sure to target those. With our students in grades 3, 4, and 5, we would start by looking at the skills at the top of the progression to identify students' strengths and weaknesses in reading. At the top, we begin by looking at our assessments that measure reading comprehension and fluency skills. If older students have difficulties in those areas, we would move down the chart and look at how is their fluency. If their fluency was weak, we would go down again and look at phonics and decoding. If those skills were weak, we would go all the way back to phonemic awareness, if that makes sense. So this is a helpful framework for teachers to reference as we analyze our reading assessment data. In addition to the DIBELS assessment tool that Jen mentioned earlier, we're also using the Phonological Awareness Screening Test, or the PAST, and the Quick Phonics Screener. Those assessment tools correlate to various skills outlined in Scarborough's reading visual and help us target our instruction. As you can see, reading is a complex process. Louisa Moats, an expert in the field of reading, says that teaching reading is rocket science. So through our continued professional development around the science of reading, teachers are growing their understanding and beginning to shift their teaching of reading to best meet the needs of all students in their Tier 1 instruction.
This is an overview of our fall, October, DIBELS benchmark data. Each grade level has a specific set of subtests that are weighted to show the likelihood of each student meeting the end-of-year benchmark for their grade level. As you can see, the majority of students in each grade level fall into the green column, indicating these students need high-quality core instruction to continue their progress. This is that Tier 1 level on our MTSS model, where we are focusing our professional development with teachers this year. We use the specific subtest data at fall grade level meetings to form instructional groups, as Rebecca was just talking about, really looking at what students need, and to plan for them in the classrooms. The yellow column indicates the students in each grade level that need strategic support in order to meet the end-of-year benchmark. This can be strategic support from the classroom teachers, as well as our literacy intervention assistants. The pink column shows the number of students in need of intensive support in order to meet the end-of-year benchmarks. This may be provided by any number of staff members. It can include students receiving tutorials as part of their special education IEPs. It can include support from our literacy teaching assistants, maybe more frequently or intensely than other students. It can also include intensive support from the classroom teacher as well. For example, if you look at our kindergarten numbers, we have more than half the students at that grade level showing that they need strategic and intensive support in the fall. This wasn't surprising, as we know that the early childhood learning experiences of this particular group of students was significantly impacted by the pandemic. They just weren't able to access preschools in the same way that students before them have been able to learn and grow together.
So within the general education kindergarten classrooms, kindergarten teachers and kindergarten teaching assistants are focusing their strategic and targeted instruction in the classroom on phonological awareness skills, letter-sound relationships, and letter formation. Kindergarten represents an example of a need for focusing on our core instruction rather than providing intervention to 50% of a grade level. We anticipated that we would see a change in the winter benchmark data once students adjusted to being in school and received explicit core instruction in these foundational reading skills. In fact, preliminary results in kindergarten from our January assessments show a 17% increase in students in the green category, a 10% decrease in the number of students in the pink, and a 7% decrease of students in the yellow category. So these results still need to be reviewed at all 3 schools' data meetings, and we will plan potential interventions accordingly. Next slide. Okay, so interventions for at-risk readers in grades 1 through 5, provided by the literacy teaching assistants, are focused largely on foundational reading skills, those blue strands of the word recognition portion of the simple view of reading model. Reading interventions include explicit, direct, multisensory instruction and word reading skills. Through consultation with me each week, teaching assistants plan specific lessons for their groups, collecting data and making decisions about next steps in instruction. The teaching assistants take anecdotal notes and data throughout their daily lessons to inform their instruction. TAs also check in with and consult regularly with classroom teachers. And these interventions are happening sometimes within the classrooms and sometimes outside of the classrooms, depending on space. Interventions represented in the table on the left of this slide are general education interventions provided by our literacy TAs in our new model. The numbers do not include special education students receiving reading services through their IEPs. The table shows that 100% of students receiving interventions in grade 1 demonstrated growth in their reading skills. 95% of students in grade 2, 79% of students in grade 3, 86% in grade 4. If you look at grade 5, 50% of students showed improvement. Using the progress monitoring data, we adjusted the intervention, and on mid-year benchmark assessment, we're happy to report that 100% of these students have made progress in their reading skills. The data represented in color on the right side of the slide are some examples of students receiving literacy intervention from grade 1, 2, and 3. The top line in each represents the fall benchmark data, and the second line represents progress monitoring data. You can see the progress in individual measures of the DIBELS as students have progressed, in some cases, from red, which means intensive support, to yellow, which is strategic support needed, to green in some cases, where they need core instruction. We want to ensure that these students receiving intervention continue on a trajectory to meet the end-of-year benchmarks. And if they aren't, we will be re-looking at what is happening for them both in the classroom and in the intervention block and adjusting accordingly. Recall from the beginning of the presentation those drivers of an MTSS system. We will also be looking at scheduling, staffing, and alignment of our instruction between the classroom and the interventions at the same time to ensure continued progress for all of these students.
So our next steps. We have just completed 2 weeks of mid-year DIBELS assessments. Students took those tests in the last 2 weeks of January. And this week we started grade level meetings. So we've met with 5 grade levels so far across 2 schools. And that schedule continues out tomorrow and throughout next week. So we really take time during those meetings to look at and with teachers and think about what do they need in order to plan for the needs of their students. What is the data telling all of us that we need to be focusing on? What resources do they need? What professional development? What consultation? And really trying to think about how do we plan for students. We've also had some really great successes. The data is so raw, I wasn't ready to present it tonight, but I look forward to doing that because we feel overall really positive about the growth that students are showing, especially in their intervention model. They might not be out of that red or yellow category yet, but a lot of kids have moved from red to yellow or from yellow to green. We had some celebrations on Monday when we met with the grade level, and we're able to take some kids out of intervention groups because they're really solidly at grade level expectations right now. And then there were some kids that we were still a little concerned about, and so Rebecca talked with her team about maybe let's add some more sessions into this week, or maybe for this student schedule, or maybe let's put them into a smaller group. Maybe we will meet with them individually and try to really see what can happen for them. So during these meetings, we strive for alignment between everyone who works with each student, alignment in goals, and alignment in resources. In order to continue the MTSS work across the district, teachers from all 3 schools representing each grade level will convene to begin our draft of our essential literacy agreements for instruction. This is the next iteration of our literacy data team, and we look forward to continuing to learn how to best teach reading to our students together. We had planned to meet together on January 12th, but because of absences and staffing, we really wanted to prioritize teachers with their students during those few weeks in January that was so difficult. So we postponed our meeting to the Wednesday before vacation, and we're really excited about it's our MTSS group and our PDC group together. DESE also released a small competitive grant for literacy resources in mid-December with a due date of January 7th. So we did submit a grant application in early January, hoping to gain some financial support for new K-2 core resources. I have not heard back from them. I'm not sure what will happen, but it was an opportunity. The MTSS literacy data team will work to vet those resources and share feedback, ensuring that teachers' viewpoints are making any decision that we are able to move forward with. If we don't receive this grant, we're prepared to be making recommendations during next fall's budget process for the following year while we build capability and resources as we can in the meantime. So we hope that we've been able to show the vast amount of professional work that's taken place this year in our elementary schools. We're also involved with DESE through their Literacy Support Network and are encouraged to be working with colleagues across the state to bring best practices to our literacy model. We'd really like to acknowledge the incredible work of our teachers and our teaching assistants this year. Under these lingering, unusual circumstances, they have really come together to support our students. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that presentation. I'm going to ask the committee if anybody has, I'm going to ask if anyone wants to start with just if anyone has a clarifying question or Jen.
In your slide number 7, you have students demonstrating growth. A, what does that mean? Like, does that mean their scores went up 1 point, 2 points, 20 points?
Point.
And
feel like
how
we
much
need-
variation is present in your data?
So if you look at the top, can I? I'm coming around. So if you look here at this first grade student, these are various subtests. This one is related to phonemic awareness. This one is related to seeing a word and being able to pronounce the sounds. This is being able to blend those sounds together to read a word. This is your ability to read a passage, so a paragraph or a page of a passage, and the percentage of accuracy as you read that passage. So in the fall, the student was able to get a score of 2 on phoneme segmentation fluency, and in November at Progress Monitoring, a score of 44. So that's going from the red, meaning intensive support needed, to just core instruction needed for that particular skill.
It's not a percentage.
I understand that, but that is one student.
Correct.
Like,
We're showing you
how
a
did you-
sampling of the data.
Like, if that student went up 65%, that's great. But if you had another student that only went up 2%, would they still be considered demonstrating growth?
Yes, but there are varying degrees of growth. So as a result of what we see with the progress, we make adjustments to, say a student is in a group of 4. That student might move to a group of 2. So smaller group size, meet more frequently, and that kind of thing.
So I'd really like to see the variation in that data, to see like how wide of a range we're talking about when we're talking about improvement. I think it would be a more accurate measure of how much the students improved. I would also like you to see you guys do some statistics with this data, so that I mean, 100%, I'm not gonna argue with that, but 4 students and half of them improved, that could just be random chance. And without the statistical analysis, there's no way of knowing that.
Right. So with those 4 students, initially, they were receiving an intervention that was largely focused on fluency, and we weren't really working on discrete word reading skills based on the data. We adjusted what we were doing. We began teaching syllable types and syllable division rules, and we saw they have moved pretty significantly toward the grade level standard. I hear what you're saying about statistics. I think that's not my forte I'm not a math person to put all of that together. So we're really looking at individual students and making decisions in that way. And getting them to benchmark.
But
We
we're
can-
happy, once we've got this mid-year data kind of looked at with teachers, we're happy to come back and share that.
I mean, I think it's great data to do individual students, but like to like judge the success of the whole program, I really think we need to know the variation in the data.
Well, I think,
I think to keep in mind also, we're halfway, so.
I know.
And I think variation levels out as we get more data points, if you will. If you start to increase the data points, I think it's a good opportunity for us to collect the data, do their analysis, but also, once we get a full year's worth, then do a full-scale look across each of the particular assessments, because each one of those is weighted differently when you come up with this kind of final score. So if the formula is about this long, and
Right.
it's part of the overall score, if you will, for each
Yeah.
child, so that would be worth looking at in the end, like overall, where did 20% of the kids started in red, or 40%, and then by the time they were through a full school year, they might be only 1% left or something.
Yeah,
Just-
and that would be great.
yeah, I think that's important for us to look at as a whole too,
Yeah.
as we get towards the end of the year and have 3 full sets of data.
Yeah, no, if you have data over time, you can do all kinds of fun math.
Yeah, oh yeah,
yeah, or
not Rebecca though.
what we report where I work is the total percent growth,
Yes.
which, sometimes it looks like 15%, but 15% growth is still okay, you know what I mean? And sometimes there's negative growth, and that just is an indication that the growth wasn't there. So.
Anna?
Thank you. I have a clarifying question, and then I'm not sure when Dana wants to take more philosophical questions, but can you go back one slide above this that has the sort of overall? So I want to look at the 5th grade number just to make sure I'm understanding your data correctly. So you're saying that 17% of all 5th graders in the district are receiving intensive support right now? So then if you go forward to the next slide, are you saying that that's only 4 students?
No, the slide, this is receiving general education interventions.
Okay.
And the previous slide is all of our students, so they are receiving special education.
So the 4, with the 4 students that we're looking at individually here in this very intense sort of data, would they be part of the green column, the yellow column, or the red column on the previous slide?
The pink or yellow.
They're
I don't know
either,
if they-
I don't know off the top of my head if they're pink or yellow or a combination of the two. It's, when we're looking at the data, everything is weighted differently, so they may have been pink in an area that we wanted to make sure we're targeting. It's hard to put into words, but they could have been pink or yellow or a combination. I don't know off the top of my head.
No, that's okay. So I guess I'm having a hard time understanding. If you go back to the next slide, if we're saying, I can understand mathematically how grades 1, 2, and 3, those numbers might relate to the prior slide. I'm having a hard time understanding if 20% of all 5th graders are in the yellow column, needing strategic support, and 17 are in the red, how does that yield only 4 students?
Because it doesn't.
I'm just going to jump in if I'm wrong, but I think my understanding is that what you're saying is that by the time we get to the 5th grade, that there are very few students who are receiving this intensive support who are not on an IEP.
Yes.
That,
Okay.
whereas
Correct.
in the earlier grades, you may have a larger number of people that are receiving this intensive support but are not yet on an IEP. Is that correct?
Yeah, is that accurate?
Yes.
So I think the next time, there's a little bit of a conflation then, because we sort of have the yellow, red, and green, which mean one thing, and then on the next slide, you also have yellow, red, and green, but it means something different, and the percentages mean something different, so just from like...
So the yellow, red, and green is simply, green is at the grade level benchmark, yellow is in need of strategic support, and red is in need of intensive support, and that's a DIBELS measure. So DIBELS, I've got my handy chart, like Eric said, the equations are crazy. DIBELS has a measurement for each of these subtests for each grade level, and there is a range of, it's a predictive measure, right? It's trying to decide, will the student meet the end of year benchmark, and are they making progress towards the benchmark? So the grade 2 student was in need of strategic support for correct letter sounds in October, but is meeting benchmark and on target for correct letter sounds in December. The previous slide is the composite of all of these subtests. So DIBELS has these complicated equations to create composite scores that change, like Eric said, they weight each subtest over the course of the year. And that's what the color code is with the composite.
Okay.
So it's... Also add one, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I just to clarify this. Within this set of data, there's also a next jump where the weighting changes. So as kids leave this mid-year and start to head into, where they should be, if you will, based on the DIBELS assessments, the weighting changes dramatically. All of a sudden, a kid needs to now really ramp up fairly quickly. So the comparative data in my assumption, will change fairly dramatically as well as we move from the mid-year to the end. So
And
it's interesting the way that DIBELS has it set up. So it's kind of a gradual improvement to get to here, with the goal of getting to grade level benchmark by the end, but all of a sudden it just ramps up in that second
it gets
half.
harder as they get...
Yes.
It gets harder. So my other question...
It's actually more the mid-year benchmark is not 50% of the end-of-year benchmark. It's more like 75 to 80, depends, every subtype's different, every grade level's different, but it's not like we would usually typically think of, you know, a halfway point. So if kids are on this linear mark, you'd think they'd be halfway to the end of year. It is more than halfway. Eric and I were looking at subtests.
It's like a hiking analogy. You might cover 1 mile vertically, but if you do it over switchbacks or you go straight up, are very different depending on what halfway means to you, if I understood what you just said correctly. I still have a question about grade 5, though. If you go back to so that all makes sense. Thank you. Is there something, I'm just looking at the overall percentage of 5th graders that are still in the yellow and the red category. I can understand that very easily for kindergarten in light of the pandemic. I'm a little more surprised to see that the jump from 4th to 5th remains so high, and I'm curious if there's something, is there something in the water with our 5th graders that has led to that? Because there is a bit of an analogy. Like I can understand earlier and then dropping, and then 2, 3, and 4 are relatively comparable, but 5th grade is an anomaly, and I'm wondering if there's a reason why, or if we know why.
I don't know that there's a reason why. I know I'm more familiar with one school's 5th grade population than another, and we have a significant number of kids in intensive language support in special education in 5th grade, more than any other grade level. And then a long time. So I don't know that there's any specific reason. I just know that there are, and I know of other buildings that have pretty significant moderate needs within special education at that grade level as well. So I can't speak.
I forget, is that a bubble year for us? I know 4th grade is a bubble. Does 5th grade have a bubble?
No.
So it's a relatively small grade.
It is.
That's
Might
interesting.
bump things up as a smaller number of kids as a higher percentage, but yeah, it is, it's not a bubble year.
Also, Anna, 4 is a relatively small sample size, so like, it could just be due to random error, that number is 50% instead of 75%.
No, I'm looking at this chart here, the overalls, not the slide before.
Okay.
Eric?
I was looking at the high numbers of the 20 and the 17, not the others.
Okay.
That's interesting. I wonder, it's interesting because I know one thing, if you think, you know, longitudinally over the scope of the pandemic, right? 5th graders had the longer train of advantage of having sort of normal elementary school. So it's actually really surprising because you would have thought at this point those kids had the most regular experience coming into these assessments. I would have thought that, you know, grades 3 and 4, 3 especially, you know, you think about kids who are in 3rd grade now have really had very little normal elementary year experience. It's just surprising. I'll be really curious to see what happens with that data, especially knowing that it's a smaller overall grade, so it's not necessarily that the student-teacher ratio is harder or that we're, you know, that's interesting. The data is very interesting there.
Eric, did you have something to add?
Just reminder, if you go back to the budget process, when we talked about movement of staff, one of our staff travels with this 5th grade group into 6th grade because of the intensity of the programming that several of the kids have in the 5th grade now. There's I think 118 5th graders that are scheduled to go to 6th grade, and they have still that higher need in our language-based program specifically, but also in other areas.
I mean, it just happens.
Yeah,
I mean, when my son,
Michelle? Yeah.
it just happens. When my son was in middle school, over 25% of the kids in the grade had an IEP, and there were several of them that had learning disability related to reading. Some grades, it just happens.
So that goes in support of the shift that we're trying to make in the way that we teach reading. So for years, what we're talking about with the simple view of reading was a methodology that was preserved for students with dyslexia and reading disabilities. But what the research for decades and decades has supported is that this is the best way to teach all students how to read. All students learn the same way and benefit from structured literacy practices, which is the shift that we are in the midst of making. So we're really excited about it. We have a lot of teachers that are starting to really learn and feel excited about it and see the benefits. So that does go to why, one of the whys we're making, the changes we're making.
Excellent.
Jen?
Are you going to use this data, I mean, I think it would be a great use of the data, but like to determine who's going into what classes the following year, so that you don't overload a teacher with.
So we use a variety of data points for placement across elementary schools.
I know, but
And absolutely.
we haven't had this before.
We have had different types of language arts data, let me put it that way, and we do strive to create balance. So there's often only 2 or 3 classes for students to be placed into within a grade level, but we certainly group students with similar needs. We try to make sure there's balance between 2 or 3 rooms. We try to make sure if there are 3 rooms that we have enough support to meet the needs of students, but we really try to make sure that not only are there social connections, but there's academic connections in each classroom, absolutely.
Okay. Anna, did you have a comment?
Yeah, more of a comment and sort of a question, and I'm glad that you let us know about the grant application, which again, I salute you for doing that. I love it when people are always looking for additional support, especially from the state, Representative Belcito. But I guess my question to you is, we are on the cusp of our budget now, and that's sort of baked. So I'll offer a comment and then a general question. I think this is all so new and it seems so good, and I know the two of you well, and I know Mrs. Adamick well, and the fact that you're excited about it is really validating to hear, because I know there was a lot of angst around these changes, and the fact that the two of you were saying, it sounds like you like this and you're supportive, and it takes time to marinate. So with that in mind, what are something that we could do right now, or this coming year, or maybe even this current year, to help make this better? Would you benefit from more staff or more resources or more time or a data analytics offer of some kind? Like, what would help you do
Actually,
this better?
Yeah, the amount of hours that we spent building spreadsheets is crazy. And so Eric and I have been talking about looking at a data management system, like Dibble's data management. It's actually a few new companies now, but we really are looking at a variety of tools actually, not just for Dibbles, but for other interventions, to be able to monitor student growth, to be able to keep the intervention information, the progress monitoring. We definitely need a more sophisticated way to do that. We've been using spreadsheets for years because we're measuring these discrete skills, and how many letters can a student say in a certain amount of time, or how many can they name. Like, we are measuring very discrete skills, but to be able to analyze it would be a great investment. Is our model perfect? No. I mean, absolutely not. But are we so new at this? Absolutely, that we need some more time to continue to grow and fine tune. One of my biggest takeaways after being in one building for 15 years is I thought we were all the same, and I've been really surprised we're not all the same. And it's really hard to do things exactly the same across 3 schools. Rebecca is doing an incredible job working with her teaching assistants. It's really the first time that these kids across all 3 buildings are getting the same interventions, and that's not to the fault of anybody before this. We just haven't had a model. Even with one person overseeing it, it's still really hard to have consistency. That is a challenge. 3 is challenging, 3 of everything. So we need some time to continue to fine tune the model. We are going to need resources. There's no perfect, you can talk about that. There's no perfect program.
Right.
There's nothing that exists right now that is perfect, that has foundational skills along with that language comprehension strand. There are some programs that are coming out that can be aligned with, that have really strong language comprehension and content and background knowledge and really exciting programs, but they don't have foundational skills, so you need to find the right match for that. So we are in the middle of the wave. We are not at the front of the wave. We are not at the back of the wave. We are at maybe at the top crest of the wave of districts that are really trying to figure this out. And we have some really strong pieces of instruction, and we have some great teacher knowledge. We've created a really strong awareness of the need to make changes. That was the one thing we've asked teachers to do. We didn't require any changes this year. We just asked them to really learn about the science of reading and these practices. And teachers are doing a tremendous job trying to meet the needs of their students, and they're learning new things themselves, and they're trying new things. But it's so hard because there's a lot of free resources, but they have to gain them themselves. So that's
Did you say free resources?
There are free resources,
Okay.
but to get a free resource, you need to research it, you need to find it, you need to download it, you need to print it, you need to organize it, you need to provision it. Like, there's a lot of work that goes behind it. So that's not something fair to ask teachers to find. So that's the work of our MTSS group, is I feel like in the general education interventions, we've narrowed down. We can always add more resources, we'll fine tune this. We're hoping though, we can't intervene our way out of a weak tier 1. And so that's why simultaneously we really need to be building our tier 1 instruction and our understanding, because hopefully this tier 2, and I don't want to keep adding to this model, I'm hoping we can design it over time and maybe even shrink it a little bit so that kids are getting what they need in the classroom in tier 1.
So to summarize some of that, and I think the committee will laugh when I say this out loud, but and it will hearken the ghost of Peter Walsick. But it sounds like what you're saying is there's a huge data input component to these programs, and there's an analytical piece to that that requires a lot of time, and we all know that data input and analysis is, it sounds like you could spend all day doing that. And it sounds like you're asking for some sort of piece of software or a tool or something that could help with that might alleviate pressure on the teachers, which sounds sort of like a learning management system of some kind. Not a full throttle one, but I just think we have to take a moment to laugh about that, because that's sort of funny to me. Like, really, can we just laugh? Honestly, it's funny. But Rebecca, especially since you're saying, you're a reading specialist, that like the math, the data is not your expertise. Would you benefit from like a quarter-time or part-time person to help do database management things, like that kind of thing? Because those are jobs that exist and tools that exist. And
I think if we have the software program, that would be incredibly helpful, because you can run reports and all of that. We're trying to do that ourselves.
Yeah, I mean,
by tallying. No.
Yeah, but the data at the student level is, we're determining how many words correctly a student's reading in a certain amount of time. We can do that over time. We don't need a data management system for that, but we need a way that teachers can hold that data and use it, but we don't have it later. It's hard to carry data from year to year. So that's where there are programs that you can administer DIBELS the same way we've been doing it, and they will have the class reports for you. All the stuff that we've been building is right part of the program.
okay.
The other piece I just wanted to add too is just we really do need continued professional development. And Jen mentioned this in the presentation, but we have teachers at varying places along the continuum of their knowledge and understanding. So we're really trying to make an effort to meet teachers where they are and provide differentiated professional development that meets people where they're at, and that's not always easy, and we need to continue with the professional development for the teaching assistants who have done an amazing job, and that's something we want to continue to grow in the model.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. All right, anybody else?
I just had one more question.
Jen?
Sorry. So you said in your presentation that the data from slide 7 didn't include the IEP students. At some point in time, I would really like to see the data from the IEP students, because I just want to see that this program is helping the students that really need it the most.
Yeah, that's one of our down the road pieces too. So the district literacy intervention specialist is a general education position and overseeing general education interventions. So that's what this slide represents. But we have talked a lot this year about the need to not only align what's happening in the classroom with what's happening with the literacy interventions, but also what's happening with the special education assessments and tutorials. So that's something that we have been talking about at the leadership level, about how do we continue to align what students are doing. We've proposed that DIBELS benchmarking is something that, a tool that special ed teachers think about using as part of their progress monitoring, so that classroom teachers then recognize and understand that same data. Because that's been, the assessments that special education teachers use are not always familiar to a classroom teacher, so it's like a foreign language. So the more that we can, alignment is the key word here, because the more that we align and build together, the top, we've had like a reverse pyramid, and we need to, really strengthen what everyone's getting in tier 1, which narrows down the need for those upper tiers.
Okay. Thank you. That was really helpful.
Thank you. Great work.
Okay. Next up, I'm going to invite our state representative, Jamie Belcito. We thank you very much for coming this evening. I appreciate it.
I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. I do want to open up by asking, it seems to be that Hamilton Wenham schools are the only ones who haven't announced if they're closed tomorrow, so I'm getting that question.
Trust me, we've all heard about it.
Do we have an answer on that?
Sticking to it.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet, okay, great, thank you.
I told him yesterday to go old school, do a 5 a.m. call.
All right, exactly.
He can't be outside in the weather determining it. He's in the meeting.
Oh, my goodness. Well, I'm just thrilled to be here, Dana. Nice to meet you. Always a pleasure.
Always.
Julia Campbell. We're not in Beverly anymore. This is wonderful.
No, we're not.
It's on the tracks finally.
Hey. I'm just thrilled to be here. I am wearing comfortable shoes a la Brad style, so I did want to point that out. I can only give you information that I'm sure that you already have, and am here to say I'm so incredibly impressed by the presentation I just saw. I know the work that all of you have been doing over the past 2 years. I have jumped in on your Zooms. I've spoken with you as your state representative, but also as a parent and part of this community here. I just want to say thank you very much. These are volunteer positions. There's more work to be done, I think, than running for state office in some respects, and I say that tongue-in-cheek and in all seriousness. I just want to say thank you for keeping the students focused in the work here, and I'm looking forward to doing what I can do in my capacity for you here, so thank you. Would you care for me to open up by asking for questions, or would you rather have me give you some just standardized information and then take it from there?
Yeah, I think it would be helpful to start with some, just the basics.
Okay, great.
information.
So-
Absolutely.
As we know, every year at this time, the governor puts out what I hope will be her agenda and her budget, at least this time next year. But the governor this year has put forth the proposed budget, and so we work from that within the legislature, okay? These figures always are massaged and worked on as we go forward, and the unrestricted government aid we've seen increase with this budget. We've also seen the Chapter 70 funding has increased for this year. Across the Commonwealth, $5.98 billion, an increase of $64.8 million. For charter school tuition reimbursement and $41 million for additional support for special education circuit breaker reimbursement for cities and towns. I know that's the very important part of discussions within our school committees. Chapter 70 aid to cities and towns, and again, these are very high-level figures, it was about approximately $6 billion, and then for special education circuit breaker, the budget for that was proposed is approximately $400 million. All right, so those are the generalized figures. For this particular school district, and we're taking a look at what cracks me up is this cherry sheet. It doesn't look cherry to me, but I wasn't here when they actually were. So hence the name. Chapter 70 funding for the Hamilton Wenham Regional School District for FY '22 was $3,791,389. Proposed budget for this year is $3,840,439. regional school transportation, and this is something that I am concerned about. We see 490,426 from last year, and then this year's proposed is $445,050. Have you folks seen this? Do you want me to pass this around? Would that be helpful?
So the strange thing is, that goes to our state, or to our boards of selectmen, but we are never sent that.
Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. This is very easy to pull up, okay? And I think
It's very easy to pull up, but I do not understand why the
that doesn't
Department
come
of
to you.
Revenue does not, sends that to our towns. It also will send our Chapter 70 certification to our town members and not to us.
Okay,
So if you could ask them why that is, that would be fantastic.
I will do that, and I would also encourage maybe the question to the chair of your select board as well, as to what that communication protocol is, and I thank you. I'm Jamie, hi, give me your name.
Michelle Bailey.
Michelle, hi, you know what? I'm gonna say my eyes aren't doing so well, so I'm just gonna say hi to everyone.
Hi. Hi.
Nice to see you.
Hello.
Dana, in person.
Pleasure.
No, so you're on, no.
I'm the superintendent.
You are, okay, nice to meet you. Okay, very nice to meet you.
Pleasure.
Vinny, yes.
You are,
Assistant Superintendent, Finance and
you guys
Administration.
are doing the hard work, everything.
Hard work is love.
That's it, you should know each other.
We do. Oh my God,
Years
you're
and
the guy
years
that
and
lives
years.
on one- And you're not related to Karen?
We're here.
Oh, I love it, I love it. That's great. Well, I'm going to circulate this here. It also shows, school choice, which means you've got students coming in to the district, right? So last year was 516,886. This year, it's, proposed is 480,68. School choice, the school choice sending 119,497 last year. Proposed for 2023, 124,041. And what I can do is send this. Dana, I can send
That would be great.
the link, and then you can disseminate
Yes,
from there.
absolutely, that would be helpful. Yeah.
It's on the state website, too. If folks want it, it's on the state website. You can pull it up digitally, too. But I agree, it'd be nice if they just sent it to us, but it's, findable.
Let me pose the question as to how that information is disseminated, because it would make sense, or even if it goes to Joe Domalewicz, or I don't know whom to.
Neither do we.
To cite. Thank you, Michelle.
Right, it sounds, Michelle, it sounds like from your description that they're doing it the same way that they would do for a municipal school, and they're not taking into account that we're actually a regional
It's a
school,
regional,
and
that's
that we
right.
would be, it would be
Correct.
beneficial if we would get that.
That's right, that's right.
Yeah.
And Superintendent Tracy, does that come to you or no?
I get it from my association,
That's right. Okay.
but it's just downloaded off of the DESI site.
That's all that is there, yes. So, but again, I appreciate your query, and let's see if we can
Yeah, I
find
mean,
something.
it's annoying for me to find out from my selectman or select woman, I guess they're select board members now,
Right.
that our Chapter 70 was certified at whatever before even maybe Vinnie finds out, because the state has sent out a notification.
That's right.
Right. What's increasingly annoying is they don't necessarily fully understand the numbers. I don't mean that in a negative way, but with the regional district, it is a very complex situation. So they're seeing those numbers and not fully comprehending where it's coming from. So for them to get that raw data before us, to be able to sort of, give them the information on what it means, it just sort of further complicates an already complicated process.
It is
of,
very complicated.
coming up with a regional budget, which because you cover a couple of different regional school districts. So.
Yes. Yes, and that is our district indeed. I did want to cite quickly the overview of the Chapter 70, just for historical purposes here. FY20 was 3,711,000. FY21, 3,742,000. FY22, 3.7, and then the proposed is 3.8. So we're seeing an increase of $50,000 here. And
So are these numbers coming from the governor's budget?
that's
or-
correct.
okay.
Well, you know what, I'm going to ask this. I had asked my office to prepare these previous numbers. I want to make sure, I don't know if these, what I just stated, 20 to 22, if these were actual, what we saw come out of those fiscal years with the FY23 being the proposed, or if those were indeed the governor's numbers. So please let me clarify and get back to you on that.
You haven't memorized it in 3 months? So-
Say it again?
Said you haven't memorized it in 3 months?
Listen, it's been 6 weeks, actually, so no, I haven't.
You know, I appreciate the fact that you're sort of coming in and diving right into it, being so, you know, especially replacing Brad, who'd been here for so long and understood the process. You know, like I said, I think it's, I know I feel really good about having you here because as someone who represents multiple regional districts.
Yes.
You know, that transportation budget keeps getting lower and lower and lower.
Yes, it does.
And no one was hearing, you know, I understand, I can imagine Brad was screaming for us, but no one was listening to Brad. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but, you know, hopefully another voice and a different voice is going to help that. So our numbers start going up as they were promised originally, you know, to one of the reasons why, you know, districts did regionalize. And every year.
That's
we
right,
see
that's
our
right.
transportation sort of getting, you know, budgets getting, or reimbursements getting lower and lower and lower. You know, and it's a unique issue that, you know, none of the major districts, Lynn, Brockton, Boston, this doesn't affect them. So, you know, it really falls down the list of importance when you're coming up with budgets, but to small districts like us and to, you know, Masco and Triton and the
That's
likes,
right.
that it's everything.
That's right.
And I'm sure you'll hear from Narissa
I've got a printout right here.
that, you know.
Nerissa
it-
Wallen, you said it.
Yes, I'm sure you're going to hear from her.
Yep.
Because this is a big deal. The regional transportation was the nugget put out there to get districts to regionalize, and then the state has never lived up to their obligation. And it's really, transportation in a regional district is very necessary. It's also legally required, and yet they're taking away the money. So it's wrong, and it hurts us in a big way. And when we were told to take out 20% because we were expecting the reduction, then he was like, is that in the Chapter 70 and the transportation? Because that's a big deal if I have to take it out of the transportation
right.
too. It's a big deal, so. And unfortunately, the regional districts, there are not as many of us as there are other ones, but in this part of the state, there is, and we're not happy.
Representative Bill Zito, before we move on from this cherry sheet, because I do have a couple kind of more detailed questions, so Vinny, I want you to listen carefully to this too. On the transportation, you know, in addition to the cuts and what we've been saying and just the general frustration that we have, but every year, having signed the warrants for our district, Vinny, what is our overall expenditure for those busing contracts that we spend, like just off the top of your head? My feeling is it's more than double what we're getting from the state. Is that right? Like, what's our actual dollar amount we spend on busing here?
For general ed, it's about 900,000.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
900,000.
Just for general ed, and then special ed's probably another 700.
So Representative Bacido, here we're looking at 1.6 million in our tiny little district, which honestly is like 5 miles across, right? We're not even talking about the geographic spread of other districts within your district. And the state's reimbursement to us is $445,000. You know, we're talking about a quarter of it, which essentially is an unfunded requirement that's been put upon us. So I want to just make sure my math is right, because I remember the warrants being high. I was always shocked at how much money we paid for buses. So thank you for that.
Because there's a formula. They don't reimburse you for every student. It's only the students transported over 1.5 miles. So anyone under is fully paid for by us, in theory.
So in that regard, does the fact that we're a small district hurt us because we have people moving so little geographic distance?
Correct, since we're kind of local elementary schools for the most part.
So I think the thing I would want to take back up to the thing I'd want to take back up to the state level is, you know, some of these proposals come out are so biased towards bigger districts, both in terms of numbers, bigger regional districts in terms of geographic spread, because we're tiny, you know, we've chosen to regionalize in a tiny way. I think the other really high-level comment is to look at the Chapter 70 reimbursement formula for us. And again, Julie Kelly and Narissa, I know, are all over you on this, but you know, we're looking at a budget next year of $43 million before offsets and revenues. We're looking at less than $4 million of Chapter 70. So, you know, we're not even getting 10% of our funding from the state. This is a bigger problem than Hamilton Wenham, but as a state level official, I don't think that people realize how difficult it is for districts like ours who have such a limited revenue stream. We get so little funding from the state, and it's causing our taxes to just go into chaos. I mean, these problems are well known. Something has to be done about the overall regionalized formula for how we're getting reimbursed, and we need, I mean, this is more of a campaign statement, but we need politicians who are going to make public schools a priority, and we need people to fight for public schooling at a state level. And when this is where the rubber is hitting the road in these small little ways. It's not about we support this, we support that, or democracy is education is the bedrock of democracy, yada, yada, yada. I need state officials who are going to advocate for dollars coming to the district, because all those things that we just heard our district literacy team talking about, I mean, they're talking about applying for a grant to get a piece of software to do something in a district where people are paying almost $20 per thousand. And we've got people writing grants to do this. I mean, I'm actually really glad you were here to see that, and part of that. But it comes down to this, is that we have so little support on a state level, and we have so little options within our own community. So I would just say we need more money from the state. Every district does. I will jump off my soapbox for that. The other question I have, and I don't know if this is just my newness to some of this, how on earth does the state have an estimate for what our choice reimbursements coming and going is going to be at this point in the budget process? How would they know that in this we're receiving $30,000 less than we thought? Where does that number even come from?
I'm going to ask, and it's not to put this off of my shoulders, but I'm assuming that there is
I can actually answer that, too.
Okay, because there is some sort of projected
There was
formula.
a weirdness in it a few years ago, or what I thought was weirdness, but ended up being something to do with living near the town line. And I had contacted Brad, and Brad told me that they just used last year's actuals.
But, and so they're just using that to move.
They just
they're
roll it
rolling that
forward for your
Yeah,
projected.
That's right.
But in this case, they've cut it. They're cutting our receiving and adding our sending by what appears to be one student, if it's about $5,000 a student.
That's what he told me when I asked about it, is that they just roll your actuals
And
forward.
Vinny, can you, is that, maybe I misunderstood. At one point, I thought that you had sort of said something like what Michelle is saying, that it's the school choice, it's last year's. Is that based on that?
I'm not sure what number the state uses.
Okay.
I use a different number in our
You
budget
do.
process.
Okay.
Yeah.
Based on actual enrollments as of October 1st. I'm not sure how the state comes up with it.
Well, if that's even true, we know that our actuals were 77, right? And that number keeps sticking in my brain. 77 times 5 is only 385,000, and they're projecting 480,000. So I guess those numbers seem like they're pulled from the sky, and I would love to know where are they really coming from and how accurate are they? Because I think if it's really a rollover, then we're going to be short you know, I just, it doesn't, it seems like it's made up from something in a chalkboard in the sky, and I would love to better understand where it's really coming from.
They reconcile the number at the end of June to give us what we actually
Yeah.
deserve, or what our actual enrollment is.
'Cause it's not just 5,000, because if we spend more than
Correct.
5,000 on a given student, we get some of that money back at
Right,
the end,
right,
too.
right. I know,
So
I
that's
know.
why it's not just 77. But I'm concerned with these numbers, because, like, biologists do the math. Hamilton's Wenham's overall budget is going down 0.8%. But if
Right.
you look at the budget of all the regional school districts, their budgets are going up 4.9%. So why is Hamilton Wenham going down when all the regional school districts on average are going up, and going up proportional to inflation? I mean, basically what the governor's asking us to do is to do a better job with less money. And it's just not acceptable.
We did lose almost 20 school choice kids, which is where a lot of the reduction is coming from, the school choice receiving. Because every other number is going up except that one.
You're saying we lost 20 students who are choosing to no longer come here?
Choice in from another town like Beverly or another district.
Okay.
That's
Well,
the
or-
only number that is dropping year over year.
Or we have
on the-
consciously made the decisions sometimes because of whatever class size, not to add more. But I think this year we had difficulty filling. But in some years, we can't because our own students are filling all the, not all the seats, but most of the seats. So,
I will say this.
But if you want to work on that issue, like $5,000, come on, they've been the same for 20 years.
Yeah. The regional school districts, first and foremost, I'm going to rely on you for the detailed data. I'm going to do up here. And the up here is this. The Student Opportunity Act was phenomenal. And it's achieving the goals necessary for schools that had only one bathroom operational with hundreds of kids in it, and 3 floors with one bathroom that was working on the first floor. 25 different languages being spoken, et cetera, et cetera. These are challenges that our communities don't face. However, it doesn't negate the fact that I'm continually being asked as a parent, as a community member, where I live in Topsfield, to continue to step up to the plate to do a Prop 2.5 override, and that's not how you fund education. I'm a member of the Progressive Caucus, and we decided this morning that, public education is one of our top 3 priorities. And that's how it should be. And I believe that we've seen public education be underfunded for 4 decades in this country. And the pendulum is swinging back to say that it's worth the investment for us. And there's a lot of pieces of the pie that are broken. I'm going to go back to what I was saying about the Student Opportunity Act. Communities and schools like ours aren't looked at with the same sort of challenges, although the taxpayer, every taxpayer cannot continue to bear the brunt of the burden of what we're being faced with. And so I am going to, and have been since day one, speaking to my other regional school representatives, i.e. Wachusett High School. I am representing Triton, I am representing Masco, I am representing Hamilton Wenham, I am representing Manchester Essex, and there are many other regional schools. Dave, I don't know what I said that got you fired up there, but.
I forgot Manchester Essex.
Yes, Manchester Essex as well.
Your entire district is regionalized
It's all
practically, except for
regionalized.
Ipswich, you know?
And then there's Essex Technical
They'll love to come to visit us.
as well. So I am here to take aggregate data, and when you say it as starkly as you did, school committee member Sedzek, that you're saying, if you have a $43 million budget, and what the state is giving is only subsidizing 10%, that's not good enough.
Less than.
It used to, I remember when it was 17 and we were complaining that it used to be more than that.
That's right,
So-
in the good old days. And we are chasing our tails and cutting our nose to spite our face, and we're all fighting over scraps. And we need to be looking forward, and we are doing that. And I think that there's dedicated leadership within the State House to say that that's how we are moving forward. And so I do stand here in solidarity to say, I will stand in the way of the harpoons and the bullets and whatever else, okay? It's not that I'm not there to support what was done to uplift communities that were most definitely affected, but it doesn't mean, all of our schools have deferred maintenance issues. We've got a whole host of issues, from higher ed to lack of access to early education. So I want you to know, I am more than happy to put this off and just listen, but know that I'm here and that I want to help raise these issues with you. So I thank you for this work, because it's incredibly difficult.
You definitely didn't walk into an easy role here, right? I think that, as Michelle pointed out also, that, you do have all, regional districts, and, I work in Lynn, Michelle works in Gloucester, so some of us work in larger
Okay.
urban.
Yeah.
And, so we're well aware of the needs in
Yes, you are.
those cities and, as well, right? So, I mean, I think that one of the problems is you're sitting there trying to divvy up this money into all, try to solve every problem, right? And it's hard to sort of spread across the board, Now, if you put all the, teachers and admin on mass health, and then took the healthcare.
Are you gonna go with the
object
universal health?
out of our budget,
Yeah,
we could figure out the rest.
yeah.
I'm going to say that there's a whole lot of discussion that needs to be had on a lot of issues here, and I thank you for the discussions, because they need to be put out there. And we've got to focus on keeping our students centered. And when we're looking at cutting things and cutting into bone, that doesn't allow us to move forward. And so I am here for coffee talk as well, post this evening, okay? I would open my door for that and welcome that. And I can't promise the moon, but I can promise a loud voice. And I will want to put this in writing. And I don't believe it's going to go into a black hole, but I will put it forth on behalf of my schools as we move into budget requests for this upcoming cycle. And again, I only know what I don't know.
Right.
And I'm here standing with you, and I thank you for giving me some grace.
I mean, at the very least, if they could match the Chapter 70 increases with inflation, so we're not trying to do
I wrote that down.
the same with less money.
That's right.
I mean, even that would be better than what we're getting.
Michelle, go ahead.
I just was curious, a few years ago, Auditor Bump came
Yes.
to Triton, I think it was. And it doesn't seem like a lot has been done with that report on regional districts really being underfunded. So I don't know how your role interacts with that role and your caucus interacts with the auditor, but
Oh.
if you haven't read the report, I would really encourage you to, or maybe have a conversation with her office, because, the evidence is there that regional schools have been underfunded, and nobody seems to care.
And you said that this was a bump?
Auditor Bump
Yes.
released a report about 3 years ago, and, Brad Hill was at that meeting as well, and he took heat for, he needed to be bringing home the money based on this report, and it didn't happen. So, and it's because regional schools don't have the same clout, because we don't have as many of us. So,
Yes, and so I will connect with the auditor's office and get that information. And I thank you for bringing that historical knowledge forward, because sometimes with turnover, those sorts of, that sort of vital information gets lost in translation and transition. So thank you for bringing that up, and I am sending the auditor's office a note right now.
Anna?
I have one other comment about budget, and then I actually have a question not budget related, if
Please.
that's okay to indulge
Please.
for the moment. I think the other thing about thinking of regional schools in the context of overall public school funding, because I think, I'm a huge proponent of the Student Opportunity Act and what it was seeking
Yes.
to achieve. And I think it's really important not to pit the needs of regional districts against the needs of non-regional districts. Because in my mind, the real issue fundamentally in the state of Massachusetts, with the resources we should have and the money that we should have, there should never be a question of, is this district or that district getting what they need or what they don't need? I actually think the premise of saying, well, we kind of have to prioritize here, and we're going to do so at the expense here, I would say, why is the state like Massachusetts even cutting corners on education at all? I believe in the Student Opportunity Act. Give the extra funding to offset. I mean, I'm a big proponent of equity. I think actually this entire committee is. The fact that we have to even make a choice is, to me, the farcical part of the conversation. There should be enough money flowing through the state. I think the state of Massachusetts alone is like one of the fifth largest economy in the entire world. There was some new report that came out in the country, right? Like Massachusetts is huge. So why are we even making concessions on something this important? So as you go back and have these sort of higher level conversations, and I just don't want to pit it as, well, regional schools, they need this, they need that. It's like, we all deserve what we need, but we don't all need different things. So I'm fully supportive of Student Opportunity Act and giving districts what they need. That doesn't mean you can just ignore the little regional districts. So I just think it's an important framework, because we need to fund public schools, and this state should be at the forefront of that.
A rising
Right.
tide raises all boats.
It's all boats.
Oh. Can I make a non-budget related plea? And I don't know if you can do anything about it, but I feel like it's important to say it publicly. At this point in the pandemic, the lack of leadership and ownership of public health related issues like masks policies and attendance and all of the COVID related things that are perpetually foisted back at a local level is an abomination and an abdication of leadership. And I would love to have someone more at the state level go back to the governor and Commissioner Riley and say that the culture wars that are happening at the school committee level, and tonight was an uncharacteristically quiet night here, but I actually listened to the Masco School Committee meeting last night, which was a riot, like a literal, scene. Could you please compel the state level officials to be state level officials and recognize that public health decisions should not be a subject of local control, because most of the heat that we're getting are on issues so far above what we have knowledge and control over. And I think it's absurd that the 7 of us at this table are gonna have to vote on a mask mandate and receive heat from our neighbors about whether or not I love children, or I understand science, or I believe the CDC. Frankly, it's an absurd proposition that's been created by a failure of leadership at the state level. So you can tell Commissioner Riley that I feel strongly that that is on them, and as our representative, they need to take ownership, because people like us, volunteer elected officials who are not paid, who have no protective staff, who have nobody fielding emails for us, whose names and addresses are public information for any Yahoo to go out and find. For the first time ever, I have started to fear for my personal and familial safety because of some of the rhetoric around these issues. And that's an obscene position to put volunteer elected officials in, who are simply trying to help kids in schools. And they could make that go away if they really believe that masks can come off at 80% vaccination, mandate that for us. If they really don't think it's safe, say it's not possible. But this idea that we can have if you feel like it, if that, maybe this. In our own meetings, we talk about the CDC. Do we listen to the CDC? Do we listen to the DPH? Other than Jen Carr, none of us are, Dr. Jennifer Carr. None of us are biologists who have any capacity to understand that. Could you please tell them they're state leaders? We need them to be state leaders, because I'm tired of getting hate mail and feeling uncomfortable in my own community because I don't know what the right decision is about masks. Thank you.
I really appreciate you sharing that. I want to hear from my school committee members. I, again, want to emphasize the fact that you've put your name on ballots to represent our children in our school systems, because that's who comes first, and you're doing that because you believe in the public education framework, and that you're trying to move this forward, and that there is a way for this to be handled. We're in an incredibly tenuous, continually tenuous situation that does not warrant disrespect, worry of harm and repercussion, et cetera, when the focus is on the health and wellness of our children. And so I thank you very much for raising that to me, and I am going to utilize the position I'm in to convey the messages that my communities need. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
I did want to state also, if it's not already known, there is an emergency COVID subcommittee that has been developed in the State House that is focusing on this and other issues, and in the House it is being chaired. It is being chaired by Representative Driscoll and Representative Decker. And if you were to go to legislature.gov, look under joint committees, you will see that there's a joint committee addressing this, and they are compiling information and feedback, and they did have the governor. I don't believe they've had the Secretary Riley on as of yet, but I also want to say, and I don't have particular reference in front of me, but I do believe that there was some communication that came out from Secretary Pizer on mask recommendations, and we can take a look to see what that is. And Superintendent, I'm not sure, and Vice Super, if you've seen that communication come out from Secretary Pizer and Mary Lou Sutters on that, but let me go back and see if I can find that, and I will forward that over.
My only other comment on that is that this kind of disruption, especially at the school committee level, a little bit the Board of Health, but especially recently, it's actually leading to the breakdown of the civil process. And I know that we had a meeting that we had to start and we had to adjourn because it was disrupted over some of these issues. And I know that this has happened in numerous municipalities. So on that level, if there's any support for the concept of a civil forum, the fact that we even have to worry about it, I live in fear of what might happen because of some of these policies. It's a disturbance to the regular order of how small towns work, because we have people furious at us for decisions that we are not equipped to make. So it's leading to the breakdown of civil society in a high level. I would hope that they would care about that.
I know that I do, and I want to not speak on behalf of the senator, who, although we're in two different political parties, that doesn't take away from the fact that community is at the center of our districts, and the way that we as parents, as elected officials, as adults, speak to each other, especially during such difficult times. We must model the way that we would like for our children, coming back to the center of why we're all here, be able to maneuver through incredibly difficult, and although perhaps these past 2 years feels like a decade, this is a temporary moment in time. In the anger, from my perspective as an elected official, to the anger as my perspective as a parent and an individual, is not adding to the health benefits that we are dealing with right now in our communities. And so I would call upon everyone to have grace and compassion and a little bit more patience, which I know is thin, because we will get out on the other side of this, and we will look back and it will be a mere memory. And although traumatic, we have to realize that we are still going to be living in the same communities with each other. And at some point, the mask will come off, and you will look at each other in the face, and you will remember what that experience was. And so with that, I am here, mask or no mask, to help elevate whatever you need. And I am committed to doing what I can for our schools here. I think you've done a formidable job, and I thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Really
being here.
appreciate you coming this evening.
I'm available anytime, honestly.
And I also want to say thank you for your help recently navigating our public posting dilemma when our website was hacked. I do think it's important that you get some public recognition. So you were very helpful to our call from that very lobby right out there of how to help. So thank you for your assistance.
It was my pleasure. It might have been a little bit futile because the law was the law, but I will say this. It happened to so many other websites, and that was very difficult. And I will say that we in the State House are rolling out money to help data privacy and other technology infrastructure, because we're being faced with this every day. And that was a very clear case in point as to how these times that we live in can be challenged. And so I'm glad you were able to work through that. And again, I may not always be able to come up with the answer, but I try to figure out who to call.
And I really do appreciate that, your responsiveness, and you and I got to meet before we met. There we go.
Yes,
So,
yes.
thank you.
My thanks to you, and I would ask the superintendent and the school board, whatever your end result, compilation, PowerPoints, overall budget request, if you would be so kind to send that to me. I would like to take into consideration the overarching budget versus what we are giving from the state, and really try to compile that. I think that there is a need to have a coming together of regional schools. And again, it's not what the school board member spoke about in regards to us versus them. It is equity across the board, and it is representing our smaller communities and our smaller regional systems, and moving the focus on public education and funding it equitably. So I thank you very much for.
Again, thank you for coming out, being sort of so new to the role. This is not an easy room to be in. Ask our last superintendent. So,
Or the one before that.
we have some deep,
Or
if
the
we can
one
find
before
her. If there's some of us, it's been going on for a long time, obviously, and, not an easy first night to meet us all, but so I appreciate it.
I thank you. I thank you. I will conclude my time here. I know that there's a lot more to be done. I'll stay for a few moments, but please reach out to me. You can find me on the State House website. Anna and Julia also know how to get in touch with me, as does Amy and Dana, and now the two Michelles and the superintendents, and my new friend, Mr. Polito, not related to the LG. So,
That is
yes,
correct.
please.
Just in terms of sharing knowledge, at next week's Salem State Starwind Festival, there is going to be a talk on navigating public school COVID policies using science that's open to the public. So
Jennifer, say that
it might be
again?
where somebody, yeah.
Doctor, what was it?
So it's at the Darwin Festival, which
Oh,
is
yes.
yeah, and it's on how to navigate basically COVID-19 using current scientific information. And it's going to be a pretty good talk.
And it's going to talk about science.
Yeah.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure. We are rooted in science and truth. Thank you. I truly appreciate it. Thank you very much. I look forward to working with you, and I appreciate being a part of this evening. Thanks.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you, and
you.
you are,
Thank you.
of course, welcome to stay, but please don't feel obligated.
Yes.
Yeah,
And a snack.
it's cold.
Okay. So next on our agenda, Eric, I think you wanted to discuss the strategic plan.
Thank you. I put this on the agenda because I think it's important to at least have the discussion of what we're looking at and what direction we're going. And certainly want to preface this by saying I'm not trying to not do this work. I'm trying to do this work well. And I think it's important to understand all of the pieces of data that we're going to need to do this well, including all the information that I'm going to pull from my entry plan that we've been working on, the report that we're just wrapping up now on the facilities, which is quite extensive and probably going to be eye-opening. The portrait of the graduate, which is basically wrapped up. We're doing some final fine-tuning right now. The complete look at literacy data across at least one school year for us. The equity audit, the results of that equity audit that we won't know until June, and then kind of the bigger piece of making sure we involve people in the community, making sure we involve our staff and faculty, and do things like focus groups. I've talked to probably 4 or 5 different superintendents, some current and some retired, and tried to get some advice on the process, if you will, and really looking at it from the perspective of being realistic, but also doing it well. Every single one of them said, well, you should probably do it in conjunction with the budget process. As you know, the goal was set to do portrait of the graduate and then immediately flip over to the strategic planning process. The bigger piece of this, I think we can start doing that now, but we'll be consistently waiting for data all the way through till the end of the year. It makes sense to me, but again, I'll do whatever the committee would like to do. I'm prepared to go either way. It makes sense to me to take the strategic plan and shift it towards June to kick off, and then use the summer to gather all of the pertinent data, everything that we can put together. And then in the fall, in tandem with the budget process, start to build the strategic planning so that by December, when we're starting to roll out the initial budget presentation, we'll have a strategic plan to drive the work and or the conversations that we need to have around the budget. So I just wanted to put that out there. I'm very willing to go either way. I'm trying to hit the goals, do them well, but also for the benefit of why we're here. I mean, to do the best we can for our staff, faculty, and our students. And I think part of that is what's a little bit troublesome when you start to look at the bigger process of strategic planning. It's not just saying, hey, we're gonna look at curriculum and that's gonna be one of our plans. It's deeper than that, and I think it's important to take the time to do that and dig for some of that, while also realigning it with the actual budget process, so that we can make, I think, better budget decisions as well when we're having those conversations in December and January. But I wanted to run it by the committee first, because it is part of one of our district goals this year. And again, I'm very willing to continue down the road, but I just wanted to kind of give you what I've learned from just talking to different people in and retired from the field. I've called a couple of consulting groups just to kind of see what their timelines are. They run between 3 and 6 months, depending on what you want to do, how much data you want to collect, what you want to look at. I just think there's a lot of pieces of data that we need that we won't have. If we start now, we won't have it. We'll be waiting for each piece of data to kind of come at us to include it in the process.
I think that, and I don't want to speak for everybody, I think that you're meeting the goal we set for you of getting this going by collecting that, setting up a timeline, So I wouldn't be worried about trying to finish it all by February. I'm sorry. I wouldn't be so worried about trying to, finish it all, having it in place so that you're dropping data, as long as you have that plan, like, okay, now here's the solid plan of what it's gonna look like. Again, I speak for myself, but, I would definitely see that as you're meeting the goal that we set out. The goal isn't necessarily to have it finished by the end of, by your review. The goal is to have it, in place when we're working on it.
Julia?
Oh, yeah, I agree. When Eric talked to me about this, I just lent my support because I don't think you can create an effective strategic plan without having all of the results of the portrait of a graduate, the DEI audit, all the moving pieces together. I think the purpose of the plan is to synthesize all of this data and all of these reports, and then figure out what does this tell us and how can we use this to move forward. And I love the idea of doing the strategic plan in conjunction with the budget process, because if you create a strategic plan with all these lofty goals, not in conjunction with the budget, then how are you going to fund it? So I really like the idea of it all together. So I'm fully in support of it, of pushing it.
Anna?
I think in addition to what's been said, I think it's also good to just be mindful that both of the towns are involved with their strategic planning at different points along the way. We know that our aging facilities, again, Representative Bilcito, I'm glad you're here, experiencing, I think, the newest of our 3 elementary schools, if I'm not mistaken. We have really, really big things, so I feel like it would be almost premature to go through a box ticking exercise to say, oh, I see a goal, let's do the goal. I think everyone in the committee knows I never really loved the strategic plan portrait of graduate proposal that we got. I voted against it, if I'm not mistaken. So, I fully support getting more data. I'm especially keen on the equity audit because I think that's something that has never been done in this district. And it also would seem like a waste of the resources we're spending to do the audit to then go ahead with a plan before we're done, before we do the budget. I mean, it implies that we're going to dismiss whatever that audit tells us, and I think that would be an unfortunate thing. So I guess my question, are you looking for some sort of formal decision or permission to say we're not going to do a strategic plan this year, we're going to start it? Would you feel more comfortable with some sort of framework from us?
To have the conversation and just get some direction. So part of this is a couple weeks ago, I was sitting in my office next to this pile of reports that we've paid, who knows how much money, lots more than we want to probably say. And these the operational audit from 2011, the structural analysis in 2008. And as I going through all of these, I'm like, we just keep doing these things, but never taking the next step. And I need to fix that, like for me personally. And I just feel like checking the boxes, and I also agree that the whole Battelle thing is not my steez, and I don't think it's my plan would not be to continue the strategic planning process with them. I really feel like, given the information I've gotten from others who've been through this more times than I can imagine, we'd be in a better place if we just slowed it down a little bit and kind of picked it up later in the school year. But again, I don't want it to be like, oh, he's trying to back something out, but we're going to deliver you some quality information over the next 5 months that will give us a really strong foundation moving forward to really make some good decisions and make them happen, which is the piece we keep missing in this district. And that's, just there's a lot of transition, a lot of things, but I want to try to make this happen, and I think it's important for all of us to do that.
So, to Anna's question, and I think you and I talked about it, it really was purposeful to say the word discussion of this strategic plan. It was,
Yeah.
You weren't looking for a vote. So my understanding is that if you're sort of taking the temperature of the committee and getting an understanding, and it would be, you'd be pushing it back in some sense, but there's I understand aligning with the budget. We would still be getting, some work would be going on now, correct?
Oh, yeah,
So that would be,
going on.
we would still be getting updates as you continue throughout. It's not as if we're putting this a pause, we're just, the process is going to take longer.
process is, all the other processes are still on the same timeline.
The strategic planning
Just
process, I mean.
The process for strategic planning, I think we're starting a tad too early. I think if we shift it 3 months, we will have a better result, which gives me the opportunity to actually make something happen. You know, and that's from just things we're doing. Like the entry plan is going to show you that we don't properly resource our elementary schools, not even properly, but not even equitably. So those types of things need to be fixed for us to start down that road, and that's what, you know, Jen had alluded to earlier. And those are the things that we're putting in this entry plan that need to get out there so that we can actually take them on.
Anybody else have other?
I'm fine with it. More data makes me happy.
Okay. All right. All right.
Okay.
Moving on. Okay. Up next, we have FY23 budget update.
Budget.
Yeah, thank you. Vinnie?
I'd just like to point out while the lights are on here, it's starting to get a little chilly because we actually have like an energy saving system that turns the temperature down at night. So we try really hard at the schools to save energy to keep our costs down.
Thanks, Michelle. It is getting a little chilly. Thanks for doing it.
Get out the Snuggies because it's getting cold.
Before Vinny starts, everybody's phone's going to ring, okay?
Okay.
Oh.
Figured everybody would go off at the same time. I was waiting for
You don't want to announce it?
presentations to be
You don't want to announce it right now?
School is canceled for tomorrow.
There we go.
Thank you.
But the administrative offices will be open, right?
Exactly.
We'd be the lone island in the middle.
I know, you'd be the only ones. I know. We live in New England, go to school.
I was thinking, my daughter's like,
Oh, there we go. I got it.
I did put up a note there. I apologize for the delay because I was in a school committee meeting, but the kids have sent me
Oh, that was
probably
Winthrop School
100
calling me.
emails.
Sorry.
Does that mean
still
probably
in
lots of
States
people are
calling,
watching to see what you're doing?
Watching us to see if we were going to announce it. So I just pushed the button and we're good. Okay, thank you, Superintendent. You are welcome.
This gives new meaning to the idea of, were you in the room when it happened? You were in the room when it happened, on every possible level.
My kids ask me all the time, I'm like, how much power do you think I have?
Yes.
We're going to tell Julia's family that she made the decision.
Julia made the decision.
Rep Baceto, this will be good
Oh, yeah,
because
my
you'll get a
daughter-
detail of our budget.
Hold on there.
right
Okay,
here.
Vinny,
It's good.
we're ready to behave, all right?
Did you say behave?
Yeah.
Speak for yourself.
Oh,
Sorry. I think I pushed the button first.
So tonight, we're here to present to you some changes to the superintendent's final budget recommendation ahead of next week's final vote on February 10th. There it is. So there are 4 major areas that we're going to update you tonight. Just to start, it's the Essex County Retirement Appropriation, the Nutrition Services Bailout Funds, our health insurance enrollment has changed, and we have a change in our out-of-district special education tuitions. So again, the first area revolves around our Essex Retirement Appropriation Letter. I had mentioned this to you during the last budget presentation, that this was one of the numbers we were waiting for. In a normal budget cycle before the pandemic, we would have this number in early December, but since the pandemic hit, the board has been behind about a month and a half. We did not receive the letter before we needed to have the final numbers for the tentative vote. We have since received those numbers, and the overall number shows a reduction of about $80,000. Now, this number is derived by the Essex County Retirement System. They aggregate all of the districts that contribute to the system, and they look at our annual payroll, and then they divide up a proportionate share of how much each district represents to the whole annual payroll. Hamilton Wenham represents somewhere around 2.8%. This number is derived from all of our activity during calendar year 21. As many of you know, that includes a lot of the reductions we saw in FY21. So we reduced almost $1 million out of our payroll. So this directly affects this number. Now Hamilton has a lower proportionate share within the Essex County Retirement System. I had anticipated this might happen. The only thing I really didn't know is, did other districts also lower their payroll? So I wasn't prepared to lower our number. I just did what historically happens, which is about a 7% increase year over year. But again, we've now received that number, and it is showing about an $80,000 reduction. This would normally be the process to include this number in the budget. So the next three areas that I want to talk about come directly out of the Q2 forecast that I'm conducting right now. Our Q2 forecast, as you know, ends December 31st, 2021. About the second week in January, I started conducting the quarterly forecast. I'm just about wrapped up with it. I will have it complete for our next full school committee meeting, where we'll have the entire year-end forecast. But what we're seeing now, the preliminary numbers are showing that spending is down again this year as compared to last year. A lot of it has to do with the pandemic, but there are other items that we engaged in this year and at the end of last year that are also affecting this number that I'll get into in a moment. So the second area we're going to talk about, which is the first area related to the Q2 forecast, is our nutrition services bailout funds. Now, as many of you know, the district kind of reserves about $60,000, $70,000 in our operating budget. This is used to help fund the nutrition services department, because historically they end the year in a deficit. For fiscal 22, the federal government decided to cover all lunches across the country. Not only did they decide to cover all lunches, but they also increased the reimbursement rate. So what we're seeing is this is actually generating a profit for us at year end. So at the end of this fiscal year, we're predicting that we're going to be somewhere around $55,000 to $70,000 in the black. This time last year, we were $110,000 in the negative. So unlike our operating budget, our nutritional services revolving account is allowed to roll over profit from one year to the next. So we think the profit that we're going to generate this year, combined with the money that will still be left on this line, would be sufficient enough to cover a deficit next year if the federal government decides not to offer free lunches again. That's why we feel confident that we can reduce our nutritional services by approximately $30,000. I believe this still leaves about $40,000 in that line item, again, just in case it changes next year. So the third item revolves around our health insurance enrollment. When we first initiate our budget process and vote in our tentative budget, we use enrollment data as of the end of November. That's the most recent data we have when we start the process in November. At that time, we pull all the invoices for Harvard Pilgrim and we calculate what it's going to look like for next year, and we apply a premium growth rate. On top of that, as I've mentioned before, whenever there's a vacant position within the budget, we always include health insurance costs for this person. So like I've mentioned in the past, When we end a fiscal year and we have a little fund balance left over, somewhere between 1% and 2%, that's where a lot of it comes from. I've been here about 10 years. Out of the 10 years, it's only happened once where nearly every single person enrolled in health insurance. It's usually somewhere around a third to a half. So we know there's gonna be money left over at the end of the year. On top of that, because we have this cushion built in already, since our actual enrollment did drop by 2 people, again, we feel confident that combined with the actual enrollment drop and the additional people we build in, we can lower our participation by about 2 people. That's 2 people at a family plan, that is about $20,000 apiece, thus lowering our health insurance costs next year by about $46,000. Again, when I show you the Q2 forecast next week, you're gonna see that we have a pretty good balance left over in our health insurance accounts. Again, that's because all the vacant people we built into the 22 budget did not actually enroll in our health insurance. The fourth area and the final area revolves around out-of-district special ed tuitions. As you know, during the tentative budget process, and Stacey Busick was up here at our last meeting, our out-of-district placements have dropped year over year. During the tentative budget, we had dropped our overall out-of-district tuitions by roughly $400,000. While I was conducting our Q2 estimates again, we're seeing a residual balance there again. It is almost upwards of around $700,000. As you know, we dropped it above 400, so we feel confident that we can reduce this by about another $100,000, which equals about 1 placement for next year. So in total, what does this mean? This is the final reduction of about $256,000. This was presented to Capital last week and was voted unanimously to support the reduction. So this is the difference between the final, the tentative budget that was passed on January 6th, I believe, and then between the final budget that we're asking for now. You can see for Hamilton, between the tentative final is a reduction of about $168,000, and for Wenham, it's about $89,000. So that was from the tentative to hopefully the final if you support this, but just to remind everyone, when we met with the quintuplet boards in December, we presented a net overall change from year over year of about 1.2 million. Now we're coming in at roughly $600,000. So from the first time we met with the towns to the final budget, again, if you support it, it is an overall reduction of about $685,000. I hope this shows that we're trying to support the towns in their needs. All the money comes from the same community, from the same taxpayers, and we're all trying to do our part to kind of reduce the overall tax burden and meet the needs not only of the school district, but of the town as well. So what does it mean? I'll just fly through this because we've seen this about 100 times. It means an overall operating gross budget of roughly $4.1 million. Again, this includes the $2.3 million added in for OPEB and extraordinary maintenance. From there, you take off your reoccurring offsets, and you're left with an operating expense budget increase of roughly $3.7 million, or roughly 10.10%. From there, you reduce all of our operating funding sources and our E&D offset, totaling about $3.1 million, leaves our overall net operating budget year over year of about $601,000, which is equal to about a 1.8% operating increase. So when you apply that to the regional assessment, Hamilton is now being reduced from about 4.1% before to roughly a 3.35% increase year over year. And Hamilton is now, Wenham is now going from about a 0.1% decrease to just over a 1% decrease. That was our operating budget. When you layer in our debt service, overall Hamilton is going to see an increase of approximately $711,000, or roughly 3.31%. Wenham is going to see a reduction of about $113,000, or again, just under 1%. And when you layer them all in, the entire school regional school districts' debt service and operating budget is seeing an increase of roughly $597,000 or 1.7%. So if you guys kind of accept those changes, or if you have any recommendations, this is kind of what we're going to put forward for next week, for the 10th, for the final budget vote, along with the budget hearing as well. Just to remind you, that's next week, the off week of a school committee meeting. Hopefully, everyone has it in their calendars. So.
Okay. Anna?
Thank you for that, Vinny. I think it's good, actually, that Representative Balsito is still here for the question I'm going to ask. So, to be clear, the universal lunch program, because of that change, has taken our budget, which used to be a deficit, and produced a surplus that we can then apply. So, if that program were to be continued through state legislation, that would actually be a net benefit to our budget moving forward on an ongoing basis. Am I understanding that right?
You mean if Massachusetts were to take over what the federal government's?
Right. For example, if there was pending state legislation that could have been partially sponsored by a person sitting in this room, would that be a net benefit to
Of course it
our
would,
budget?
Yes.
Okay. Just want to make sure for the public listening and the representative sitting in the room that we all understand that. So, thank you.
The benefits also for kids. I mean, we have a huge number of kids that are now getting lunch that were not. So I think that's been extremely important to note for people as well.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, I mean,
outside of the budget.
Yeah, I've supported lunch before it was, before it was a thing, but I also think that Michelle Horgan has brought forth support for that amendment, and you said we're going to talk about it next week, is that right? So,
Michelle, did you have something to say?
Yeah, for Vinny, not for that.
Oh. Yes, we are going to talk about that
Yeah.
next week. Michelle?
Yeah, thank you, Vinny, for doing this. I just want to make sure that the towns understand that this isn't fat that we're cutting, right? This is at a cost to our students. And just so they know, I know we've done good faith. We've done our work to present, that we're working to help everybody. But to know, and they have to understand that this is, it's not what's best for our students. We're doing what's best for the community, right? Am I being a little bit too dramatic? But it's best for the communities, but it's still hurting our children a little bit.
Correct.
Right?
It is still taking services away.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Anybody else? Well, I just want to say I really appreciate not only your work, as always, Vinny, on this, but also the capital finance. It sounds like you guys really did some hard work on trying to make it as absolutely lean as possible. And as Michelle said, there wasn't any
Vinny
fat to
and
begin
Eric
with.
did all the work.
We
We did the discussion.
absorbed.
Did the discussion.
And, there is more to the story. There is more to the story, but the big thing here is, I'm not 100% sure we want to talk about these reductions as taking money from the children. What it's really doing is it's putting risk on us, because we've reduced the assumptions. So what we've done, and the towns talk about this a lot, like, they have risk because if people don't pay the property tax, then they don't have any way of making it up, whereas we are guaranteed our money. And so what we're really doing is we're taking on some risk that, if these things don't pan out under the assumptions that we're trying to take, then we're going to have to make cuts. So what we need to do is just recognize that Vinny looked at some things and he saw that there was a historical pattern where we probably are taking the least risk. And we just hope that historical data comes forward. So it is important for the town to realize, like, we hear you and we're working with you. We're partners. So.
Michelle, thank you for that. I think that was a really important point, right? Because it's, you know, just like when you do your household budget, it's always wise to plan for the potential that things aren't always going to go smoothly, and it's difficult to judge how close to cut it, right? And that's a little bit of what we're doing. I think risk is a good way to put it, so thank you. Michelle?
Oops, sorry.
Oh, I'm
And also,
sorry.
there was and I'm glad you addressed this, Vinnie, because in one of the meetings we had, one of the Board of Selectmen in Hamilton questioned where all the money we received from the state, from ESSER funds, where it went. And I'm glad that as you always have, you're very transparent. You've provided both towns with all of our spreadsheets on a quarterly basis. And I'm just glad that, you know, we're continuing to do it, to say to them, okay, yes, we did receive these monies, and this is where the monies went. But as Michelle said so eloquently, as I couldn't say, you know, we're taking on some risk to benefit the community. So, thank you.
Anna?
I also appreciate the framework to the larger community. On the flip side, I think it's also important for all of us and the select board and the public listening that these risks could change largely through things that we have absolutely no control over, right? So we don't really know what people's health insurance enrollments might look like. That might be affected by other things. We don't really know what's going to happen with the state legislation on lunch. We're very hopeful, but you know, we can't not provide lunch to the students. Like, that is what it is. And then I think the special education tuitions is really the hedge here, because you know, and this has been a perpetual criticism, right, that we're spending all of this money out of district. And I don't know that the general public or the towns necessarily appreciate that if we get one student whose needs aren't being met, we by law, and I would also argue moral obligation, like, you have to serve that student. And so we're completely hedging, but if we have a new student into the system that requires, you know, you said it was about one student, if we get one, then we're sort of back to net zero. If we get 2 or 3, which is, you know, at the moment. So I think it's always frustrating too that we're taking on the risk, but sometimes the things that are asked of us, we have literally no control over, and state law and federal law would compel us to provide services either way. So that's the part I think that is lacking in our conversations with the town and the public, as though it's framed as though these are wish lists and this is ideal and we're trying to do things, when in reality, the district is legally obliged to provide services on a certain level that we have no choice over. And I think it's good to frame it that way, as you know, these are obligations and we're going to do our best, but ultimately we might end up over in a place that we have no control over, depending on what happens next year. So. Yep. I also appreciate that you've added color icons to the bottom of the slides. You've glammed it up
It was just so boring when I did it. I had to do something.
I mean, I've seen these slides so many times. I picked it up right away. I was like, oh, Vinny glammed up the slides this time. So.
Julie would be proud.
Very nice. And also, Representative Belcito, you can see that final number we are referencing now with the cut, the budget before offsets and everything taken out, $42,859,392. So that's when I say that the state is underfunding us by a drastic amount. You know, that's the before offsets number. So.
Yeah, up there.
Okay. Anybody else?
Thanks, Vinny.
Thank you. Thank both of you. We'll see you later. Thank you.
Always makes me happy.
All right. Next up is our review of the face covering policy. I'm going to turn that over to Eric, assuming his computer works after the fall.
See if my computer will open.
At least it wasn't the fancy Newberry.
That's right.
All right, let's see, cross your fingers.
Oh, yeah, that'd be bad on a day off. Your computer didn't work. Rats.
Have to watch Ozark all. Shucks. You know, IT
What
can't come fix it
policies?
either.
Yeah, darn.
Some data here.
IT department's down too. Yeah, wow.
Come on, Rover.
Hope it's working.
So in this week's discussion, by request of one of our members, we've added in not only the usual information of our policy, our regular face coverings policy, and then this information that you can see now, which is our case counts, which are starting to drop down a little bit, but not as much as we would like. We've also added in, both communities have put a mask mandate in place, so that's exhibit 3 and 4 on this. Hamilton was first, they did it a few weeks back, and Wenham has just recently enacted it in a select board meeting. Hamilton's is revisited at each select board's meeting. Wenham has reserved the right to review it, but has set a deadline of March, the end of March, March 31st, I think it was. So a little bit of a new layer in between the state, which is till February 28th, the two communities, which are in different places, and then the local school committee level policy. So just keep that in mind as we talk this through this time.
Eric,
See,
I think,
our numbers are,
Should be 127.
yeah,
Is that
I
a
think
typo?
you typed,
which one?
you
Yeah, it should be
repeated.
127. You have 120, 2 times.
Where are you?
If you look
date,
town
on
of
the date.
Town of Hamilton, town of Wenham, Hamilton, Wenham aggregate.
Top line.
Top line is, I think it should say 12722,
Then the
because
date.
below.
Oh, the date.
date.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yep.
Oh, the date.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, because I looked at it, I'm like, wait a second.
Yeah, I'm a little
What am I missing?
I'm a little surprised that the
127,
town
yeah.
numbers are still as high as they are.
I'm surprised the Wenham number is so much higher this next week. Is there any understanding of why that number is
I'm
higher?
sorry, say that again, the what?
The Wenham number is so much higher.
Is the delayed mask mandate.
Hmm.
There you go.
Hard to say,
Oh, right.
Wenham's been
All those
consistently
businesses that are
higher,
going
they're
to.
lower in the vaccination rate,
Bagel shop.
so they've been pretty consistently higher versus when you're looking at just town-to-town comparison.
We have a lot of congregate living,
Hmm.
so, you know, when people are living in close proximity to each other, it's,
And our cases are starting to come down pretty rapidly now. I was talking
Yeah.
to Brian at the high school, out of the 17 pools, they had 0 positive pools. So that's a big deal. We went from, we were running 20 positive pools, 24 positive pools, down to, I think, 2 this week total. So it's definitely dropping out. We're still seeing cases, just not as much.
I'll be really curious to see what happens after February break.
Yeah.
me
I
too.
think that's gonna be
Yeah, me too.
And we're also
Gonna be
giving
the
out the free tests.
telltale.
Yes.
We've started giving those out to the staff last week. They went out to the kids today, actually, a bunch of kids got them today, so. The free tests will come every 2 weeks. It's the ones that have 2 tests in a box. And each school is basically saying to parents, okay, test your child on this day, which is usually 2 or 3, sometimes 4 days away from the pool test date. And then there are some new changes that are coming where the state is saying that if you had COVID, you shouldn't really pool test because you're gonna probably come up positive over and over and over. So we're trying to be more cognizant of that. There are quite a few kids that have been positive, so that's reducing our pools.
Well, that was my question is, even though we're getting 0 positive pool tests, I'd be curious to know the total percentage of the district that's even participating, because 0 out of only 5% participating isn't necessarily so meaningful, but I know that we've had so many more cases now, and that those kids are getting pulled out, and we had a lot of kids who were opting out, so I know it says 240 pools, but that includes staff as well, right?
So you're running staff and students, and last week was 240. This current week is 177.
And there's, 4 or 5 in a pool?
Yeah, between 3 and 5, depending on where you are in the pool. If you're in the last pool, there could be 2 or 3 people.
And then do you know, out of those, what the split is between students versus staff at every level? I'm assuming you probably do, but.
I don't, but the nurses do. The nurses track all that. It's just
Okay.
we get this sheet that we're looking at right now, which has the actual pool counts. So if you look at these numbers here, this is what I get every week. The pools at each building, 177 total. Two pools were positive. So, And these are all, this is stuff that our nurses are keeping all this data that just consistently is got to be updated. They're very, they're tracking the cases right up until every single Wednesday. It has to be dropped into the DESI database, so they all have to communicate, get all their numbers. So the numbers are way down, as you can see in this chart, way back in when we came back from vacation, right down to 3. That's the high school right there. I think it's a high school. Let me just double check. Yeah, high school cases. So high school and middle school were pretty high. The Winthrop had a consistent run of 13 and then just dropped to 4 this last week. So, and what we're still finding is people are learning about positive cases at home with home tests. Not necessarily all coming up in our pools. Like we had a number of cases this week that were not identified in school. They're identified by parents, and we thank the parents who called our nurses and just let us know. Super helpful. But as you know, we're not contact tracing anymore with this new program, which is taking a huge load off of nurses to try and figure out who was where, and we're not doing the test and stay program because basically anybody who wants a test can have one.
Actually I think there's a mistake in the math in the vaccination percentages in Bucher and Cutler, because Bucher has 73.4% of its students vaccinated and 100% of its staff. So there's no way the average there can be 71.3%, because that's lower than both numbers.
All correct.
And the same thing's happening at Cutler. So you might want to check those calculations. And my other question had to do with our new system. With kids testing at home, if those tests come up positive, will those numbers be reported?
Yes, to the state. The state has given us a tally sheet that is a link that we send out. If your child is positive, please put your kid in there. So anybody that's actually giving us that information, we're reporting.
Okay,
That's what the state has asked us to do.
perfect, thank you.
But the reporting itself is still voluntary, right? It's still, that to
We
me,
could test, come up positive, not say a word, and come to school the next day.
yeah, I mean, that to me is the fascinating twist in this, which is, and I have to think it's happening, that it's such a disruption that parents are just, if they think it, again, it goes back to the disposition of the parents, but there's really no compulsion to report. And I just wonder how often that's actually happening. How many parents are actually doing the right thing and pulling their kids and calling versus parents saying, ugh.
We have quite a few. I mean,
Yeah.
we do have a lot of people helping
Not
out.
to worry, kids confess.
Yeah, right. A little harder at the high school.
The kids are like, I want to go to the nurse, and you're like, why? Well, I have COVID. How do you know? My mom told me. Like, they're stupid. They'll find out. Not to worry.
Okay.
Eric, what do you anticipate happening at the February 28th meeting? Do you anticipate the mandate extending? I don't know. I don't want to ask you to see the future, but
Yeah, well, if the state continues to operate as they have, they'll let us know the Friday before we return back to school. that
Right.
We have to
It's a
do
vacation
something.
week, so.
Yes.
You know, so I honestly don't know. I think they will drop it on the 28th. We also are in the position with the high school, middle school to reapply and say, hey, can we drop the mask mandate? So the problem we have is that middle piece of the communities both having indoor mask policies. So even if the state drops it, we still have to contend with the community level mask policies before we even get to the district level, school district level.
Right, and a lot of that too is, I mean, Julia's question too is, I mean, I assume, we're all going on the hope and the assumption that that chart that's looking the way it looks right now continues that way.
You're seeing the change, and even the guidance is starting to shift a little bit. This whole new testing program has taken it down another level where we're not, we're testing more, but we're not testing more in school. We're testing more outside of school. So it's a different layer of just kind of letting people know. People can learn on their own rather than having to go to pool testing.
Is there any value in us, or you, not us, you, polling the parents, surveying the parents again, maybe at the end of February, how comfortable they are?
Yeah, we could.
I know we did it in November, October.
Could Can I request that we wait on that? I mean, if we have to keep on masks until the end of March anyways?
Well, I'm just wondering, at the end of February, maybe, after everyone gets
saves
back from
time.
February vacation, you know,
Yeah.
there's that 2-week window.
That's a good idea.
We can definitely take the temperature, that's,
Yeah.
we can plan, right, like to talk, right when we come back. We may be dealing with a slight surge there, I don't know, but, you know, there is a new variant right now, so.
That's right.
I didn't know that.
Stealth variant, yes.
Great.
I want the pie variant really bad.
But Jen, you're saying that if the, if the town of Wenham mandate remains in place,
Bad joke.
I
Then-
mean, we just need to make it clear that even though we're testing at the end of, or even though we're taking a poll at the end of February, we actually can't change anything till the end of March. And that's only if the town of Wenham lifts the
There's
mandate.
right, there's a lot of ifs.
There's a lot of caveats.
There's a
in
lot
those.
of ifs.
Yeah.
So,
Mask
right,
mandates.
and I will say, I did watch the Wenham Select Board meeting when they made that vote, and they were very clear that they put that date on it, but they really did say we can revisit it at any point. So, that's just a different technique, right, than revisiting at every meeting, it's just a different technique, so.
Yep.
So things could change.
And if you were to apply again for the attestation, how long, was it just a week turnaround?
Yeah, it was, I think, 3 days the
Yeah, less
last time
than
I
that.
did. From the time I sent it in, I think it was 3 days later. I think I sent it on a Tuesday, and I was talking to Rob Curtin on Friday morning.
I mean, does it make sense for Eric to submit again, or to wait till after? No, everyone's shaking their head, okay.
I mean, if he's,
There's no harm.
but if he submits and he gets approval, aren't we kind of putting the select boards on the hot seat?
but all he's submitting is the attestation of what our numbers are. We still make the decision. He's just getting affirmation that our numbers are what we think the numbers
I'm
are.
going to recommend that if we're going to do that, we put it on an agenda first.
Yeah,
So,
agreed.
Okay.
I'm just wondering if that,
We'll,
yep,
we had a meeting yesterday.
yeah, we'll think about,
Which will-
I agree, though, that if we were going to do that, I think it should be on an agenda ahead of time.
Definitely.
okay.
Okay. Right, are there other questions or comments about the face covering policy? Okay. All right, Eric, still you, the district goal updates.
Me, district goal updates. So we had the final meeting of the Portrait of the Graduate group on Tuesday night. We started, I don't know, a little over 50 people. We ended up with about 35 consistent attendees. Majority parents and community members helping us out with this. And we went through the final drafts of some of the competencies, collected a little bit more feedback related to the draft. One of it was parallel structure of each of the competencies to try and put them in within the same structure. So that we're working on. We'll actually be doing that tomorrow at some point in the ice. And then also looking at the designs. I mentioned that the kids had submitted a number of designs, so we've kind of honed in on actually a combination of two. We've kind of squeezed two together, and right now the graphic designer for Battelle is professionalizing and making it clean for us so that it meets all the requirements, and they're going through all the feedback that we got Tuesday night related to the graphic. So we're honing in on just finalizing it and hope to present it in the next couple of within the next couple of meetings to the group, and then again that'll be the basis of things moving forward and immediately into the accreditation process. So that will be helpful in that process that we've done that step in the work. There's still more work to do, but we'll have the competencies, we'll have the descriptors, and we'll have that graphic that goes with it for future as a foundational piece.
So can I just ask you a quick question about that? So the portrait of a graduate that comes out of this district planning will then replace the portrait of the graduate that was created by the high school staff? Is that what you're saying?
Well, that one was actually done by the entire staff, I think
Okay.
8 or 9 years ago, when we had, those are the
Okay.
transfer goals,
Yeah, okay.
which were suddenly magically turned into the portrait of the graduate, which didn't go over well, so. this
Okay.
is this-
So-
Yeah, so they'll basically replace the transfer goals, and that will be, the conversations are, okay, one of them is adaptability, so how are kids adaptable and how they learn to be adaptable within our curriculum, and what are we doing instructionally, what are we doing K to 12, so there's a lot of connections that still need to be made over time, but it'll be a good starting foundation, kind of that core value piece.
Okay.
The DEIB Advisory Committee continues to brainstorm on ways to involve families and caregivers. Really trying to get groups within our communities that are historically marginalized, preliminarily identified as kind of opportunity and belonging gaps. Like, do we have groups that feel like they don't belong? We actually do. We have some pretty good information right now that we're finding in the entry plan that's helping us to hone in on that. So they're just looking at the best way to review that data and create artifacts. The first trainers workshop has already kicked off. There are 8 faculty members representing each school. We'll continue. I think they have 2 more training dates for the trainers, and then they'll head back into the schools on the March PD day and spread the wealth, if you will, at each of the schools. We are using Mighty Networks, which is an online, how to describe it, almost like a bulletin board, but it's a place where articles get posted, you can comment on them. Regis is our main moderator, and we're asking everyone in the district to contribute or at least join the conversation. You can go in and post an article related to the DEIB, things that we're doing. You can just comment on something that somebody else posts. You can comment on somebody else's comments. It's actually this kind of big conversation that's growing between staff and faculty, and it took a little bit to kind of get it off the ground. We're starting to get a few more people involved, and connecting it to professional development has been helpful, so people can take advantage of the time that they're spending on that as well. February 9th, next DEIB Advisory Committee meeting, and they're reviewing surveys that will go out to all the different stakeholder groups in the next few weeks. And then we did the school committee already. So in the MTSS structure, you saw some of the presentation tonight and some of the work that's being done. We're doing professional study groups for PD this whole month, the whole month of February. Classroom teachers are studying books and online modules, as Jen stated. Mid-year literacy assessments are wrapping up. There are grade level data meetings that will happen from now until I think it's the 12th or the 13th. It's within the first 2 weeks of February. They're basically looking at that data for their grade level and determining next steps, interventions, et cetera. Who's taking who's going into which groups. Jen talked about the grant. We should find out in the next couple of weeks if we're a party to that grant. It covers K to 2. It was very specific by the state. And then MTSS Literacy Group, they have yet to meet. They will be meeting on the 16th, and they're really just kind of driving the work and getting some of that stuff done. On the secondary level, we've completed a number of walkthroughs, and as you may know, at the secondary level, they track the inclusive practices. So you go back to our district goals. Inclusive practices are part of the goal for the secondary level. They actually track them. All of the curriculum leaders and all of the administrators are going into classrooms in a Google form that they're actually filling in what they see when. So if you go into, I'll use as an example today, I went into Mr. Schweitzer's classroom at the middle school, watched a lesson, but also noticed inclusive practice of having, a word wall, things like that. You're looking for ways people are marking time, marking the midpoint, those types of things that we've agreed upon over the past few years. Continue to make progress on the curriculum maps. As you know, NEASC is coming the first week in March for the high school visit. And then MTSS overview of the whole staff. The middle school is slightly ahead of the high school as we planned. Elementary first, middle school rolls out, and then the high school. So middle school is currently working with their building leadership team to establish some of the measures. They've been working with our two consultants, George and Judy, to figure out what the best measures are to use. And just as Jen said, with the elementary level, we're looking at ways that we can help them by managing data for teachers, so teachers aren't spending time manipulating data so that they can view it, you know what I mean? So we're looking at a number of tools that will help us to look at the data across the district and then continue it longitudinally, so next year you have comparatives, whereas in the past you haven't had that. And then they'll continue to do the same at the high school. So it was introduced by Brian, MTSS, this is what it is. We're using the state model as our foundation, and then George and Judy, who are our two consultants, are kind of guiding the way, so they'll continue that. The Athletic Facilities Improvement Project Working Group has continued to meet. We're meeting again next Monday. Finalizing informational documents to explain the project, kind of the history, what it is, where it's been, where it's gonna go, what kind of the big picture is. They met on January 19th and January 26th, collaborating on those documents, trying to clean it up. Basically a giant FAQ about the project. Gale Associates will have the first draft of the feasibility schematics to the district on March 1st, which gives us some idea of, can a tennis court be placed in a particular area? Can the softball field be manipulated in a certain way? So that they had to go back and redo some of the wetlands to make sure that they were the same as the previous study. So that's just about done. And then work's being finalized for an existing conditions report to explain the state of our school facilities, grounds, create an action plan. We have a fairly extensive report coming out. We're just actually doing the graphic design work on it, cleaning it up, that I told you about a couple of months back, but we're strategically gonna release that. We're kind of just working in with some of the things that we know are happening and some of the things that we hope will happen. So we're trying to just clean that up and get that out to first the committee, then to the town boards. I think it's important to give to them first and then put it out publicly. And that, again, that will be a driver for future conversations, budget conversations, strategic planning, all those kind of things that we have lined up on our plate already. Final thing, I want to thank our music staff and our musicians for the in-sea concert. I was in negotiations, so I wasn't able to go, but I got lots of great feedback from people and talking to Miss Losi, who was able to get us some pictures and put out some information, so that was fantastic. And then tomorrow I'll be publishing out the Boston Globe awards that our kids won. We had a number of kids win. One for the writing category, and then a whole bunch of others for photography and their artwork. So those will be released tomorrow. I don't want to spoil it, but they're all coming out tomorrow. Some of them have gotten out on Twitter already, but we're proud of all of our kids who did win at some level of the awards. So that's all I have.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody had any questions?
No, thank you.
Okay. All right, Capital Finance, do you have a report?
So we've spent most of our meetings discussing budget stuff, and we're still looking at some other financial issues, trying to get some more information before we report out.
Okay, thank you. Policy, is there anything to report?
I think our next meeting isn't until the end of February, I want to say. There was one question, well, maybe it's a topic for a future, there was something in the minutes that we just approved about policy being charged with looking at something, and it was a topic for a future meeting. I'm trying to remember what it was now. There was something we were supposed to look at, and I wondered if that's something that we wanted to make official at some point. Let me pull it back up again. So we're working, we've made our way through a good portion of the J section. The long-awaited flag policy is officially going to be on the agenda on the 10th, so that will be really good. And let me find that. I'll come back to you in just a second. There was something in the minutes that made me have a question. I don't know if David or Michelle has anything else to add.
Nope.
Nope? Okay.
So while you're doing that, negotiations, we had a busy day yesterday. We met, beginning our negotiations with the custodial union, and we met with the HWEA, and we also had a good conversation around the looking at the regional agreement that you all had tasked us with. So we did that.
3 hours.
It was, yeah, it was 3 hours. We missed NC. And we are scheduled to meet again next Wednesday. Okay, Anna, you ready?
Yes, so in the minutes that we approved from, these were long minutes, what day was this? The minutes from the meeting on January 12th, there was a request to talk about the legislative posting question and whether or not we wanted to actually assign it to the policy subcommittee. And I guess my question is, we are approaching the point where I would make the agenda for said policy subcommittee, and I wondered if we really need to include that and how we want to move forward with that. That was my question.
That's an excellent question. I remember that conversation.
It's in the minutes. So on the 12th, the minutes reflect challenges with the district websites, revising the meeting poster procedure and identifying an alternative to the website, writing a letter to the legislature/policymakers, assign task to the policy legislative subcommittee or the full committee. So I'm looking for clarity as to whether or not we really want to take that up. Do you want policy to do something? Do we need to add it to the agenda? Do we need to take action here? That was what my question was.
That is a great question.
You're welcome.
My belief is it was really just it would really be a potential letter, I think, is what it would be. Is that correct? Is that we don't know.
I think it's undefined. Do you want to put it on the agenda for next meeting, since we haven't really discussed it on the meeting on the 10th? I need to know before the next policy meeting, which I want to say is February 28th.
A topic for future meetings would be just, a vote to either take action to move forward on that or not.
Yeah, I would appreciate clarity on that point.
Okay. I'm just writing that down. My scribbles here. Okay. So I don't, I'm sorry, did anyone have any questions about any of those reports? Okay. I don't have a ton from my chair's report. I have been attending the master planning meetings in Hamilton. We do have another meeting tomorrow, which is they switched to Zoom earlier today, so so that'll be a virtual meeting, although I was looking forward to it being in person. But so that is continuing to move forward. It is. I'm feeling good about it. We're going to be moving towards creating some surveys for the public is next steps. We did have the chairs meeting, and I would say it was a good conversation around creating good lines of communications and keeping communications open. I think it's always good to have those conversations around. The more, certainly, we've seen, I think, while Vinny, we sort of all just joked about it, seeing the budget so many times, but the more times you see things, the more communication, the better, the more comfortable everyone is. So, all right, I don't think I have anything else. I'm ready to hear topics for future meetings. I have one, the potential website issue, whether we want that. Anybody else have other? Vinny?
Our assistant treasurer resigned.
Oh.
So there's a need to backfill, and I'd just like to know how the committee wants to proceed with it, because technically it's
so we do need to do that. I don't know what the procedure is, but we do need to do that, and I did not know that, and
I think it was on the agenda, but for that meeting that was canceled, and then it kind of just slipped through the cracks, I think. And I remembered it today because we had an issue come up, so.
So, I'm trying, I mean, in terms of, I mean, I remember the procedure that we had to, you know, do we have to vote on all of those things, like, do we direct you to post and all of that? Is that, maybe we need to just put it on another agenda and how to get the procedure straight.
No,
how
I
we
think
go
they
about
just
it.
need to bring us a recommendation of someone, right?
What'd you say?
They just need to bring us a recommendation.
Right, but I think we actually, when we did the treasurer, I think we had to actually vote to say that we wanted them to do all that, I think.
I remember.
Well, that was for another reason.
Yeah, well, yeah. All right, so well, this is just whether it's on a future agenda, so I'll put it on a future agenda, and what that looks like, we'll determine at that time.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So, at the last meeting, Michelle Horrigan asked if we could get updates on candidates at meetings, and we didn't
yes.
get that
and
today, so.
that should have been part of my chair's update,
Okay.
is that I today called both town clerks, and they were both not in today, unfortunately.
They're at the clerks' conference.
What?
They're at the town clerks' conference.
One of them was at the town clerks conference, and one of them was on a personal matter. So, yes, so I do not have that information. I don't know, I didn't ask Eric, do you know whether Janelle has, we do have some information on candidates, correct?
Yeah, but it's still the same. I think you announced that last time, there's one.
Well, right, well, there was previously, we knew that there was
One candidate.
one candidate that had pulled papers
that
in.
pulled papers
when?
officially.
I think there's two now.
Yeah, so, I mean, there's two questions, right? One is, Michelle had asked that for information, and I'm sorry that I didn't get that for you. I apologize. And the second is, we do want to make part of the question is to make sure that Janelle is getting updated.
Yep.
So, my apologies.
And then I have just a question. So if the hearing is next week, is that meeting starting at 6:30?
Yes,
6:30.
6:30. Was that it?
That was,
Oh, I thought there
that
was
was a question about the agenda for next week. Is it going to say 6:30?
I thought it was going to be, and given that.
Nope.
So, okay, good. All right.
And given that, can we get Catherine Donovan to bring some cookies for all the people coming?
Wouldn't that be nice?
It's cheap, 25 bucks.
It's Wendy.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right, it's Wendy now.
Yeah, she
I
retired.
forgot, that's right.
But I did see Catherine today.
Oh, did you?
I did, yeah.
Okay, so,
I'm calling Wendy. Get some cookies.
hearing no other items, I would like to make a motion to adjourn into executive session, which I anticipate to be quite brief. So executive session for purpose number 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining with the AFSCME, and to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining with the HWEA, and where public discussion would be detrimental to the bargaining position of the committee, and not to return to open session.
Second.
All right, and it's a roll call. I'll start with you, Michelle.
Yes.
Michelle?
Yes.
Jen?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, and it is unanimous, and we are adjourned.